In a city of glass towers and forgotten corners, a barefoot girl pressed her ear against a wall she was never meant to cross. Inside that wall, a teacher's voice carried lessons about poetry and purpose. Outside, the world carried hunger, dust, and silence. And yet, between those two worlds, something impossible began. A friendship that would rewrite what it means to have worth. If you believe that dignity should never depend on where someone sleeps at night, take a moment to like this story so its message can travel a little farther. Because what began as an act of defiance soon became a lesson that money could never buy. This is the story of a street girl who secretly taught a billionaire's daughter, and the moment her secret was discovered, everything changed. But not in the way anyone expected. Now, let's drift gently into that morning, under the shadow of the mango tree, where a child who owned nothing discovered the one thing that could never be taken from her: the will to learn. The sun had not yet climbed high enough to burn away the city's fog when Amara slipped quietly through the alleyways. Her feet were bare, her steps careful, as though she feared the world might hear her trying to dream. She carried nothing but a half-torn notebook and a pencil chewed down to its wooden core. The pages smelled faintly of mango and charcoal, the scent of the tree she often sat beneath, her only classroom. Just beyond the marketplace, a tall white fence marked the edge of another universe. Behind it stood Queen's Crest Academy, a world of pressed uniforms and laughter that sounded like belonging. Amara crouched near a hole in the fence and listened. A woman's voice drifted through the gap, slow and steady, explaining the meaning of a poem about courage. The words floated like sunlight through dust. Amara whispered them back, shaping each syllable with care, tasting them like pieces of fruit she could not afford. Her stomach growled, but her eyes shone. This was her daily ritual, to collect words the way other children collected toys. She didn't know the teacher's name. She didn't know the poem's author. But she knew that every word she remembered gave her one more reason not to give up. A guard passed by, boots crunching on gravel. She pressed her face to the dirt, heart hammering until his footsteps faded. Only then did she dare to lift her head and keep listening. The sound of chalk against a blackboard was music, and she hummed along, just as her mother once hummed lullabies before the world took her peace away. Naomi Nia used to be gentle, her laughter soft like folded fabric. But life had thinned her mind until it tore. Now she sat near the bus stop, humming to herself, tracing circles on the pavement with a bottle cap. Amara checked on her before each stolen lesson, wrapping a scarf around her mother's shoulders and whispering, "I'll be right back." Naomi would nod, lost, somewhere far beyond worry, and smile at nothing at all. That morning, as the lesson behind the fence turned to metaphors, Amara tried to imagine one of her own. The sun is a teacher, she thought. Even when you can't reach it, it still finds a way to warm you. She scribbled the line in her notebook. The pencil snapped, but she kept writing with the broken tip. Suddenly, a small voice came from the other side of the fence. "You're writing that wrong," it said, soft, uncertain, but curious. Amara froze. Through the tiny crack between the boards, she saw a pair of polished shoes and the hem of a school skirt. The voice belonged to Alara Quinn, though Amara didn't know that name yet. "What?" Amara whispered back. "The word teacher. You spelled it teacher," the girl said. "You forgot the A." Amara smiled shyly. "Thank you," she murmured and fixed it. The girl lingered for a moment. "Why are you out there?" she asked. I like to listen, Amara said simply. They don't let me in. A pause. That's silly, the girl replied. If you like learning, you should be inside. Amara laughed, not bitterly, but like someone hearing a sweet lie for the first time. Maybe someday, she said. Then she packed her notebook and slipped away before anyone else could see. That afternoon, she returned to the mango tree, a grand old thing whose roots curled like sleeping hands. It stood near the edge of a drainage canal, catching bits of sunlight through torn leaves. The ground around it was littered with dry pages blown from the academy's trash bins. Amara collected them, pressing each one flat with a stone, tracing over the faint lines of ink. This was how she learned, by listening, by watching, by refusing to disappear. Later, when the bell rang and the students left in cars and laughter, one figure lingered by the gate. It was the same girl from earlier, Amara Quinn. She looked around nervously and slipped through a small side door, clutching a lunch bag. She found Amara beneath the mango tree and sat beside her. "You're not supposed to be here," Amara whispered. "I know," Amara said, "but neither are you." They both laughed, a quiet, conspiratorial sound. Amara unwrapped a sandwich and broke it in half, offering it like a peace treaty. "You can read, can't you?" she asked. "Some," Amara admitted. "Then teach me," Amara said. "Please. I don't understand half of what they make us read." Amara blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. "You want me to teach you?" Amara nodded. "My grades are terrible. Everyone thinks I'm stupid. But you listen like you care." So began their secret arrangement, two worlds meeting under a mango tree. Each day, Amara explained what she'd overheard, and Amara shared her food and her books. They practiced words together, drawing in dust when the pencil ran out. For the first time, both felt seen. As the sun slipped behind the walls of the academy, the world seemed to hold its breath around them. Amara smiled shyly. "You know, you could be a real teacher someday." Amara looked down at her dusty feet and whispered, "Maybe I already am." Somewhere beyond the fence, a window clicked shut. Neither girl noticed the shadow that had paused there, a quiet figure who had seen everything, and whose decisions would soon turn their small secret into a storm. Morning crept through the city again, slower this time, as if the light itself hesitated to cross certain streets. Amara walked beside her mother, Naomi, who hummed a tune from another life. Her hair was tangled with dust and thread, and her eyes seemed to look at two worlds at once, the one around her, and one far away where the days had not yet broken. They lived near the edge of the marketplace, in a narrow shelter of tarpaulin and cardboard. When rain came, it was not noise they feared, but the way water erased everything written in chalk or ink. Amara helped Naomi sit beside a crate, tying her shawl more tightly. "I'll find food," she whispered, "and maybe a new pencil." Naomi only smiled faintly and traced invisible shapes in the air, as if signing her name on something only she could see. Amara touched her mother's hand, the one thing that still felt steady, then slipped into the moving crowd. The market was its own kind of orchestra, metal pots ringing, vendors shouting prices that rose and fell like songs, and laughter that never quite reached the ground. Amara gathered fallen fruit, bruised but still sweet, trading one for a piece of chalk, another for a half-broken eraser. The shopkeeper, a large woman with kind eyes, sometimes left things accidentally near the edge of her stall. "You're that book girl," she said once. pretending not to notice Amara's embarrassment. "Keep your head up. You're learning for both of you." By noon, the air shimmered with heat. Amara found shade behind a fabric store and pulled out her notebook. She turned to the page where she had written her favorite line from yesterday's poem. The letters wavered slightly, uneven but alive. "Courage," she whispered, "is when your heart stands up even when your legs can't." She practiced the sentence aloud until it sounded smooth enough to teach someone else. That was how she learned best, by preparing to explain. When Auntie Lila Mensa had still been there, things had been different. Lila sold fruit near the bus station, and she noticed how Amara stayed to read discarded newspapers. She had bought her a notebook once and said, "Child, every page is a door. You decide if it opens or stays shut." She'd even paid the first term for Amara to attend public school. For 6 months, the world made sense. Pencils, blackboards, lessons, the sound of other children reciting multiplication tables like tiny spells. But then Auntie Lila's visa came, and the promises went quiet. Amara returned home to find Naomi's condition worse, and the landlord's patience gone. The fees expired, and so did her place in the classroom. The first day, she stood outside the gate and listened instead of entering. She felt shame sting her skin like cold rain. But the second day, the pain was smaller. By the third, the rhythm of the lessons reached her more clearly than the sting of exclusion. She learned by echoes, fractions, grammar, even simple geometry. When a teacher inside said, "The sum of 2 and 3 is 5, Amara whispered the numbers softly, turning them into a story she could understand. 2 mangoes in one hand, 3 in another, together making enough for both her and her mother. In her mind, the formulas were never cold symbols. They were recipes for survival. Sometimes she was caught listening. A guard might shout or a student might throw a pebble to scare her off. Once, a teacher called her street noise and slammed the window shut. But Amara never shouted back. She only waited for the next opportunity to hear. There was power in patience, she thought. Maybe education was not just a building, but a way of refusing to vanish. That evening, under the mango tree, Ilara appeared again, holding a torn math sheet. "They say I failed," she said softly. "But I don't understand why. Can you explain this one?" She pointed to a problem that read 12 divided by 3 equals 4. Amara smiled. "Imagine you have 12 mangoes in 3 baskets," she said. "You put the same number in each basket, right? 4 each." Ilara's eyes brightened. "That's all it means?" "Yes," Amara said. "Math is just a story about sharing." Ilara laughed. "Then maybe you should teach all my teachers." They practiced by drawing mangoes in the dirt, using stones as counters. When the wind blew the dust away, Ilara clapped and said, "Let's try again." There, in that hidden corner of the world, the sound of learning was not applause or bells, but 2 girls laughing at their own mistakes. Later, as the sun slipped low, Amara spoke carefully. "My mother forgets things," she said, "but she remembers music. She used to say every song can heal something, even if it's small." Ilara looked thoughtful. "Maybe that's what you're doing, healing me with lessons." The words lingered like perfume, light but impossible to ignore. Amara had never thought of herself as a healer, but maybe teaching was another kind of medicine, one that didn't come in bottles or injections, just time and listening. They parted as the sky turned violet. Ilara promised to bring more worksheets. Amara promised to bring more stories. In that moment, both believed in promises again. When Amara returned to the shelter, Naomi was awake, singing softly to the night. "The moon is a mother," she murmured. "She never stops watching." Amara sat beside her, resting her head on her shoulder. "Then tell her to keep watching us," she said. "We're learning something big." The city hummed around them, engines, voices, crickets, and faraway trains. Yet somehow the space they shared felt quiet. Amara opened her notebook and drew a small circle around the word teacher. She added a tiny heart beside it. Maybe tomorrow she would show Alara how to write her name in cursive. Or maybe she'd finally ask what it felt like to have a room where the rain couldn't come in. As the night grew colder, she whispered one last line into the dark. "Even when you have nothing, you can still pass something on." And just before sleep found her, she dreamed of chalk dust floating in sunlight, of mango leaves whispering new words to learn, and of a friendship that might yet outgrow the fence that tried to divide them. By the end of that week, the mango tree had become their small universe. The afternoons grew warmer, and the air was filled with the hum of cicadas and the faint smell of chalk that drifted from the academy walls. Every day, just after the lunch bell rang, Alara Quinn would slip quietly through the garden gate, a book clutched against her chest as though it might shatter if anyone saw her holding it wrong. And waiting beneath the tree, in her usual spot beside a nest of fallen leaves, was Amara Naya, ready with her broken pencil and her boundless patience. They had fallen into a rhythm as natural as breathing. Amara would begin by asking what Alara had learned that morning. Alara would sigh, roll her eyes, and open her notebook. "We did something about adjectives," she would say, drawing out the word as if it were a foreign sound. "But the teacher just kept saying it's when you describe a noun. I don't even know what that means." Amara laughed gently. "It's just when you make the world a little more alive," she said. "Like instead of saying tree, you could say green tree, or lonely tree, or wise tree. It helps people see what you see." Alara looked up at the mango tree and smiled. "Then this one's both lonely and wise," she said. "Exactly," Amara nodded. "Now you're learning how to write like a poet." Each lesson was born of whatever they had: dust, pebbles, a scrap of paper. They wrote the alphabet on old cardboard boxes, used small stones to mark syllables, even turned bottle caps into letters of the word hope. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. The mango tree, once a forgotten patch of green behind the academy, now carried the soft echo of two children finding themselves in each other's company. Sometimes Alara would ask questions that caught Amara off guard. "Do you have a bed?" "Sometimes," Amara answered, "when the rain doesn't come." "Do you ever get scared?" "Only when I forget to dream." "Why do you like learning so much?" Amara smiled, eyes far away. "Because when you learn, even hunger has to wait its turn." Ilara's eyes glistened. "I wish I could be that strong." "You already are," Amara said simply. "You just don't know it yet." There were moments when Amara felt almost guilty for how much she enjoyed teaching. It was the first time in years that she wasn't only surviving, she was shaping something. She began planning each day's lesson in her mind during her morning walks. If Alara needed help with fractions, Amara would pick 3 pieces of fruit and show how one was shared into parts. When Alara couldn't remember spelling rules, Amara would invent rhymes to make them stick. "Double the letter when the sound feels strong," she'd say, "like the heart in happy." Alara would repeat it aloud until it sounded like a secret spell. They were two girls building a bridge between worlds. One plank of laughter, one nail of trust, one thread of learning at a time. But the bridge was not invisible to everyone. There were eyes watching from windows higher up, servants cleaning glass panes, a gardener trimming hedges, and once, even the shadow of a tall man in a dark suit who paused by the mansion's terrace, gaze fixed toward the garden. He said nothing, only turned away when Alara's laughter reached him. One afternoon, Amara arrived earlier than usual. The academy's gate was still closed, and she waited under the mango tree with her notebook open to a new page. Across the top she wrote, "Things I want to know," and below it, one question after another. How do people become rich? Why do some forget how to smile? Can kindness be learned like reading? The last question she underlined twice. When Alara arrived, she brought a surprise, a thin, worn storybook. "This was my favorite when I was little," she said. "My mother used to read it before she left." Amara took the book carefully, fingers brushing the cover as if it were sacred. "Can we read it together?" So they did. Sentence by sentence, Amara helped Alara sound out the words. The story was about a bird who built its nest out of borrowed twigs, one from each tree in the forest. "That's what you do?" Alara said. "You borrow a little bit from everywhere." Amara smiled softly. "Then maybe one day I'll fly with it." They spent the afternoon that way, reading, correcting, laughing. At one point, Ilara's head rested against Amara's shoulder as she struggled through a difficult paragraph. For both, it felt like the first real peace they'd known in years. Later, Alara told her something she had never said out loud. "My father's always busy," she whispered. "He says he works so I can have everything, but he doesn't see that the only thing I want is him to come home." Amara said nothing at first, then quietly, "Sometimes people think love is about building walls. Maybe he's just afraid to look through them." Alara nodded. "You sound like a grown-up." Amara grinned. "No, I just read a lot." They laughed again, and in that laughter, the air seemed lighter. Neither noticed that Mr. Clark, the butler, had stopped briefly near the terrace door, holding a tray of tea. He frowned slightly, uncertain whether to interrupt. He had orders not to disturb Alara when she was outdoors, so he turned away, unaware that this moment, two girls beneath a tree, would soon become the talk of the household. As twilight stretched across the garden, Alara closed the book. "Promise me something," she said. "What?" "Don't stop teaching me, even if they find out." Amara hesitated, looking at the walls that separated them from the rest of the city. "Then you promise me something too," she said. "Don't stop learning, even if they make you forget why." They sealed the promise with a shared laugh, as if laughter itself could hold secrets safe. Alara left through the gate, and Amara stayed until the stars appeared, copying the constellations into her notebook. She didn't know their names, so she gave them her own. Patience, courage, tomorrow. When she finally packed her things and began the long walk home, she felt a quiet certainty in her chest. She was teaching one child, but maybe, just maybe, she was also teaching herself that the world could change one page at a time. And far above, from the balcony of the mansion, Gabriel Ross lowered his glass and looked toward the faint shape of the mango tree. He could hear his daughter's laughter echoing faintly through the night. It had been years since he'd heard that sound, and though he didn't yet understand why, he knew something, or someone, had just brought it back. The days that followed seemed to melt into one another like watercolor. Soft edges, warm tones, and laughter that never rose too high for fear of being heard. The mango tree had grown into more than shade. It was a small world stitched together by two children who had found something rare and invisible: trust. Every lunch hour, Amara would slip through the back gate with a nervous glance and a small lunch bag in hand. She would find Amara already waiting beneath the tree, sometimes tracing alphabets in dust, sometimes balancing a piece of chalk on her knee like a fragile secret. Their lessons were quiet and strange, the kind of learning that never fit into a classroom. They whispered over math exercises and language rules, but in their hands, those dry lessons turned into stories. When Amara struggled with the idea of division, Amara broke it down softly. "Imagine you have 8 mangoes," she said, pointing at the ones scattered near them. "If we each take 4, that's fair. Division is just another word for fairness." Amara smiled. "I like that better than numbers." Amara nodded. "Me too. Numbers don't feel so cold when they belong to someone." Every afternoon followed the same rhythm. The world outside continued as always. Bells rang, cars honked, and the wind carried bits of conversation from the schoolyard. But under the mango tree, the world slowed down. Time belonged to them alone. Some days, Amara helped Amara with reading comprehension. They took turns acting out stories, trading voices, and making sound effects. Amara was terrible at pretending to be an old man, but Amara said she had the best laugh for it. On other days, Amara wrote sentences for Amara to correct. "You missed an article," Amara would say proudly. "It's the mango tree, not just mango tree." "And you," Amara teased, "missed a smile." One afternoon, Amara brought something different: a few crumpled sheets of paper she had rescued from the trash behind the stationery store. "I'm going to try writing an essay," she said. "Like in the books you bring." Amara's eyes widened. "About what?" Amara hesitated. "About what it means to be seen." Amara tilted her head. "Like being famous?" "No," Amara said, shaking her head gently. "Being seen the way the sun sees everything, without choosing what's worth its light." She started to write that day, and her first essay began like this: "Sometimes, the smallest voice says the truest thing. Sometimes, the world needs to listen with its heart instead of its eyes." The words weren't perfect, but they were hers. When she finished, Amara clapped softly, afraid to make too much noise. "You should show this to someone," she whispered. Amara smiled. "Maybe one day, when someone's ready to listen." At school, Amara's teachers began to notice the change. Her grades climbed, her attention sharpened. The headmistress, Mrs. Davenport, even remarked during staff tea that the girl had finally found her footing. They thought it was the new tutor Gabriel had hired months ago, a retired teacher who came twice a week. None of them suspected that the real teacher was a barefoot girl who had never owned a desk. In the mansion, Mr. Clark and the maids noticed the change too. Amara hummed while doing her homework, laughed during dinner, and stopped asking when her father would be home. To them, it was a relief. To Gabriel Ross, though, it was a mystery. Still, for now, neither child thought of what might come next. They were too busy collecting moments, small, glowing fragments of normal childhood that had eluded them both for different reasons. One afternoon, Amara asked, "Amara, do you ever wish you could go to school here?" Amara didn't answer immediately. She looked toward the white walls of Queen's Crest, tall and bright against the blue sky. "Sometimes," she said at last, "but sometimes I think I'd rather keep this. It feels more real than anything behind those gates. Amara frowned. But you deserve the same chance. Amara smiled faintly. Maybe this is my chance. They went back to their lesson, tracing the letters of a new word: belonging. Amara wrote it carefully, then whispered, "It feels like a long word for such a small thing." "That's because people spend their whole lives trying to spell it right," Amara said. Amara laughed, her eyes bright. "You should write that in your essay." "I just did," Amara replied, and they both giggled. The mango tree itself seemed to listen, its leaves whispering approval. Above them, birds pecked at half-ripe fruit, and sunlight filtered through in gold patches that danced over their pages. The air smelled faintly of chalk and sweetness. For a little while, the world was kind. And yet, kindness has a fragile balance, and even the softest happiness casts a shadow when it grows too bright. They didn't notice that the gardener had started taking different routes around the greenhouse, that Officer Tate now lingered near the back gate longer than usual. The laughter of children often draws the world's attention, especially when it doesn't fit where people think it should. As the day ended, Amara packed her books reluctantly. "Tomorrow we'll do something harder," she said. "Maybe poetry again." "Only if I get to choose the poem," Amara teased. "I like the ones that sound like promises." "Then promise me you'll be here," Amara said. Amara nodded. "I will. No matter what happens, I'll always be learning somewhere." The two girls waved goodbye as the sky deepened to amber. The last thing Amara saw before leaving was Amara's silhouette framed by the garden's soft light, waving through the gate with a smile that reached her eyes. When she returned to her mother that evening, Naomi was awake, staring at the darkening sky. "You're glowing," Naomi murmured. "Did you find a new sun?" Amara laughed gently and said, "Something like that." She didn't know that her mother's words would one day sound prophetic. The next morning, Amara's teacher called her father to say she was improving remarkably. "She's quoting poetry now," the teacher said, amused. "Something about sunlight and seeing." Gabriel, half listening, nodded but said nothing. He didn't recognize the line. Yet somewhere deep inside, he felt the faintest tug of curiosity. Under the mango tree, two children were unknowingly rewriting the story of three lives, their own and one man's heart that had been sleeping for far too long. The house of Gabriel Ross was not built for laughter. It was built for silence, efficiency, and the kind of wealth that kept emotion behind polished glass. Every hallway glowed with marble floors and tall mirrors, yet the air inside felt colder than the morning mist. Servants moved like whispers, and clocks ticked in perfect rhythm. The sound of a man who measured everything except the things that truly mattered. Gabriel sat alone at the breakfast table, a spread of untouched food before him. His newspaper lay open beside a steaming cup of coffee that had already begun to cool. The headline spoke of markets and mergers, of profits that rose and fell like tides. But he wasn't reading it. His eyes had drifted to the far end of the table where a small vase of jasmine sat. Amara's doing. She had started leaving flowers there each morning, though she never mentioned it. He took a slow sip of his coffee, then heard it, a sound he hadn't heard in months, a laugh. It came from upstairs, light and free, unguarded. He paused, unsure whether to feel comforted or suspicious. For years, his daughter's laughter had been as rare as rain in a desert. He had tried everything money could buy: private tutors, therapy sessions, music lessons. Yet her sadness never left. Now, suddenly, she was laughing again. But at what? Mr. Clark entered quietly, carrying a tablet for the day's schedule. "Sir, you have the quarterly call at 9 and the foundation board dinner." Gabriel raised a hand. "Later." He set down his cup. "Is my daughter awake?" "Yes, sir. She's been spending more time in the gardens lately." "The gardens?" Gabriel frowned. "Alone?" Mr. Clark hesitated. "So far as I know, yes." He didn't mention the times he had seen another figure there, a small one, crouched near the mango tree with a notebook. Something about that detail felt too uncertain to report without proof. Gabriel rose and walked toward the window that overlooked the garden. From there, he could see the faint green stretch behind the greenhouse, the mango tree standing like an old guardian. It looked ordinary, yet something about it drew his gaze. He turned away, unsettled by his own curiosity. Later that morning, Amara appeared at the table, hair slightly tangled, eyes brighter than he remembered. She greeted him with a soft, "Good morning, father," before sitting down. He blinked. She had not called him father in months, preferring silence to speech. She reached for the toast, then began humming softly. "What's that song?" Gabriel asked. "Just something a friend taught me," she said, before realizing she had said too much. "A friend?" Amara looked down. "At school." He nodded, pretending not to notice the hesitation. "Your teachers have written to me," he said carefully. "They say you're improving. I'm proud of you." Her eyes lifted in surprise. "You are?" He smiled faintly. "Of course. I only want you to be happy." Amara hesitated. "Then maybe you should visit the garden sometimes. It's quiet there." He raised an eyebrow. "Quiet?" "Yes," she said, almost smiling. "But not empty." Before he could ask more, she excused herself, saying she had lessons. He watched her run up the stairs, a flash of movement that reminded him of her mother. Alive, impulsive, free. For a moment, he felt a pang of something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Curiosity mixed with longing. That evening, Gabriel found himself standing by the library window, again, staring out at the twilight garden. The light caught the silver frame of a photograph on the desk. His late wife, Anna, holding a baby Amara. He picked it up, brushing dust from its edge. "She's growing," he murmured, "and I don't even know who she's becoming." When he placed the photo down, he noticed a small piece of paper beneath a book, a school essay. The title, written in careful blue ink, read, "To be seen." He frowned. It wasn't Ilara's handwriting. The letters were uneven, graceful but unsure, as if each one had been earned with effort. The first line read, "Sometimes the smallest voice says the truest thing." He read the next line aloud softly. "Sometimes the world needs to listen with its heart instead of its eyes." He leaned back, a strange stillness filling the room. The words were simple but carried a weight he couldn't explain. They were not the kind of thoughts a child born into comfort usually wrote. Where did she get this? He wondered aloud. When Mr. Clark entered to ask about dinner, Gabriel handed him the paper. "Do you know anything about this?" Mr. Clark glanced at it and shook his head. "No, sir, though Miss Amara has been spending time outdoors. Perhaps it's something she found." "Perhaps," Gabriel murmured. "Still, find out what she's doing in that garden, and if anyone has been coming onto the grounds." "Yes, sir." After Mr. Clark left, Gabriel sat in the dim light, holding the essay again. He read it twice more, each time slower. For years he had tried to buy joy for his daughter, but maybe joy wasn't a thing that could be purchased. Maybe it was something taught or shared. He thought about the line again. Listen with your heart instead of your eyes. It was a simple sentence, but it felt like a mirror held up to him. The next morning, he delayed his meeting and walked the grounds himself. The gardener greeted him nervously, tipping his hat. Gabriel asked a few casual questions about the plants, but his eyes were fixed on the far corner where the mango tree stood. From a distance, he could see faint footprints in the dirt and the edge of something white, a torn page from a notebook. He picked it up. It was covered in handwriting, the same as before. Across the top, the word belonging was written in uneven letters, underlined twice. He turned the paper over in his hand, thoughtful. Whoever had written it cared about words in a way that few adults he knew did. The handwriting trembled, but the ideas were alive. There was soul here, not Polish. When he returned to the house, he stood in the doorway for a long time, watching Amara read at the piano bench. "Where did you learn that poem?" he asked quietly. She blinked, startled. "What poem?" "The one about the sun that sees everything." Amara's lips parted slightly. "A friend taught me." He nodded slowly. "I see." Then, almost kindly, he added, "Tell your friend she writes, beautifully." She hesitated, searching his expression. "You're not angry?" "Should I be?" he asked. "I don't know," she said softly. "You usually are." For the first time in years, Gabriel smiled, small, uncertain, but real. "Then maybe I'm learning too." That night, he couldn't sleep. The house felt too still, the walls too silent. He thought of the essay again, and of a girl he had never met, yet whose words had reached him more deeply than all his business reports combined. Somewhere outside, the mango leaves rustled faintly in the wind. He found himself wondering not just who had written those words, but what kind of courage it took to write them at all. And as dawn began to push against the windows, Gabriel Ross, a man who believed he understood everything about control, realized that he no longer did. Something in his carefully ordered world was changing. He didn't know her name yet, but the voice from the other side of his walls had already begun to teach him too. It was one of those afternoons when the air trembled with the weight of heat, when the sun seemed determined to press its palm against every wall and window in the city. The students at Queen's Crest Academy moved sluggishly between classes, their laughter slower than usual. Behind the greenhouse, the world was quieter, except for two familiar voices weaving sound and sunlight into something that felt like peace. Amara was showing Amara how to measure the rhythm in a poem. "It's like counting steps when you walk," she said, tapping gently on the ground with her pencil. "Each strong beat is a foot. When the poet says, 'The sun will rise again,' the rhythm goes up and down like breath." Amara tried, mimicking the pattern with her hands. "Like music," she said. "Exactly," Amara smiled. "Words are music you can hold." They didn't notice Officer Tate making his rounds near the fence. He was not a cruel man, but he had been told to keep strangers out. When he first saw the girl under the mango tree, he thought she was a gardener's helper. But today, she was sitting beside Miss Amara Ross, daughter of the estate's owner, wearing her school uniform on a weekday afternoon. Tate frowned. He hesitated, but curiosity won. He stepped closer, heavy boots sinking into the dirt. Amara looked up first, startled. "Oh, hello?" Tate narrowed his eyes. "Miss, you shouldn't be here. And who's this?" Amara rose quickly, clutching her notebook. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just leaving." But Tate had already grabbed her arm. "Trespassing, that's what this is," he muttered. "Come on, we'll sort this out." Amara's face went pale. "No, she's my friend." "Friend?" He gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "You're the daughter of Mr. Ross. You can't be." "She didn't do anything wrong," Amara interrupted, her voice trembling. "She was teaching me." That word, teaching, landed like a small explosion. A few students nearby turned their heads. The gardener paused his work. Tate straightened, still holding Amara's arm, and said, "We'll see what your father has to say about this." Within minutes, whispers spread like wildfire. Students pressed against the gates, whispering words that carried the sting of judgment. Thief, imposter, street girl. Someone even laughed. "Maybe she was after the mansion," another said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Amara stood still, her face expressionless. Her body knew humiliation well. It was an old companion. But this one cut deeper because it was witnessed. She clutched her notebook to her chest like armor, its torn cover trembling in her hands. Amara tried to defend her, shouting, "She's not what you think. She's my teacher." But her voice was lost in the noise. Mrs. Davenport, the headmistress, arrived at the commotion. Her shoes clicked sharply on the pavement, her tone brisk. "Officer Tate, what is the meaning of this?" He saluted quickly. "Caught this girl loitering, ma'am. Claims she's teaching Miss Amara." The headmistress turned to Amara. "Is this true?" Amara hesitated, tears rising. "She only wanted to help me learn." Mrs. Davenport sighed, her expression hardening. "Miss Ross, you should know better than to involve yourself in such matters. This young woman has no right to be here." "She's not dangerous," Amara cried. "That's not the point," Mrs. Davenport replied sharply. "Rules exist for a reason." The crowd of students had grown. Some recorded on their phones. Others whispered. Amara kept her gaze fixed on the ground. The world had shrunk to the sound of her heartbeat. One of the maids, Martha, happened to be passing by and froze at the sight. She recognized the girl, the one who sometimes lingered near the gate at night, waiting for the light in the mansion's window to go dark before leaving. Martha whispered, "Oh dear," and looked toward the house, silently praying someone inside would see. The moment stretched too long, heavy and public. When humiliation arrives, it rarely arrives quietly. A group of boys snickered. "Maybe she's pretending to be a scholar," one said. "Maybe she's after free food." Another chimed in, "She's just a liar." Amara finally looked up, her eyes sharp but calm. "I never lied," she said softly. "I only listened." The murmurs faded for a second, but Mrs. Davenport only sighed again. "Officer Tate, take her to the front gate. We'll let security handle it." Amara tried to follow, but the headmistress held her back. "Enough, Miss Ross. Your father will hear of this." As Tate led Amara away, the world seemed to slow. Dust rose with every step. The notebook in her hand slipped open, revealing pages filled with neat handwriting. Lessons, stories, half-finished poems. The sunlight caught the edge of one page, making it shimmer faintly like a fallen feather. They reached the front gate just as a sleek black car pulled into the driveway. The door opened, and out stepped Gabriel Ross. He was dressed in a dark suit, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. The crowd fell silent. Even the air seemed to pause. Tate froze, suddenly unsure. "Sir," he began, clearing his throat. "Found this girl trespassing." Gabriel held up a hand. "I'll handle it." He looked at Amara, really looked at her. The dust on her feet, the trembling in her hands, the tear-stained notebook pressed against her chest. And then his eyes caught the page visible through the cover. He reached out gently and took the notebook. The words on the open page were written in Amara's careful, uneven script. The world is full of fences, but learning can climb them. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The guards, the students, even the headmistress seemed to blur into background noise. Gabriel read the line twice, then looked back at the girl. "Who wrote this?" Amara's voice was barely a whisper. "I did, sir." "You?" She nodded, silent but steady. He turned to Officer Tate. "You can let go of her." Tate released her arm, stepping back. No one dared to speak. Gabriel looked down at the notebook again, then back at the frightened, defiant child before him. He could see something behind her eyes. Not arrogance, not fear, but the same quiet determination he once saw in himself, long before success had turned him into a stranger. "Go home, everyone," he said finally, his voice calm but absolute. "This is not a spectacle." The crowd dispersed, murmuring. Ilara, who had broken free from the headmistress's grip, ran to Amara and threw her arms around her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, sobbing. Gabriel watched the two girls, one clothed in privilege, the other in dust, and felt something inside him shift. A question he hadn't known he needed to ask. He turned to Amara. "You can stay for a moment," he said. "I'd like to understand what's really happening here." For the first time, Amara didn't flinch. She looked up and met his gaze directly. "I was just teaching her," she said quietly. "That's all." Gabriel nodded slowly. "Then perhaps it's time I learned something too." The garden around them was silent now, the air heavy with the echo of everything that had just unfolded. In that stillness, the faint sound of pages rustling in the wind seemed almost like forgiveness, or at least the start of it. The afternoon light had started to soften by the time Gabriel Ross led the two girls away from the gate. The air still carried the sting of dust, and the silence that followed the crowd's dispersal felt heavier than the noise that came before it. Ilara walked beside Amara, refusing to let go of her hand, while Mrs. Davenport trailed behind, wringing her fingers as if trying to erase her own discomfort. Inside the mansion gates, the world changed again. Gravel paths turned to marble, chaos gave way to order, and every sound was swallowed by quiet. Amara had never walked so far into the estate before. The scent of polished wood and old books drifted through the hallways, making her heart ache with a strange mix of awe and fear. It was the kind of place where even air seemed to belong to someone. Gabriel stopped near the study, a wide room filled with soft lamplight and the faint hum of a grandfather clock. He gestured for the girls to sit, then turned to Mrs. Davenport. "Thank you. That will be all for now." She hesitated. "Mr. Ross, perhaps it would be better if we contacted—" "I'll handle it personally," he interrupted gently but firmly. She nodded, bowed slightly, and left the room. The door clicked shut, leaving only the sound of the clock and the shallow rhythm of two frightened breaths. Gabriel studied Amara for a long moment. Her clothes were frayed but clean. Her eyes were tired yet unwavering. He saw not a trespasser, but someone used to being questioned. Ilara sat beside her, still gripping her hand, defiant and trembling all at once. "Tell me," Gabriel began, voice calm. "How long has this been going on?" Ilara spoke first. "A few weeks," she said. "She's been helping me with my lessons. She didn't mean to hide." "I asked her," Amara interrupted softly. "I thought it would cause trouble if people knew." Gabriel turned his gaze to her. "And why would you think that?" She met his eyes for the first time. "Because people like me don't belong in places like this." The sentence landed in the room like a slow bell. Gabriel exhaled, not out of impatience, but something closer to shame. "What is your name?" "Amara Nia." "How old are you?" 12, sir." He nodded slowly, repeating her name under his breath, as though testing how it sounded against his own silence. "You wrote this, didn't you?" he asked, holding up the notebook he had taken earlier. "Yes." "These are your words?" "Yes, sir." "They're remarkable." He paused, then continued quietly. "Where did you learn to write like this?" Amara hesitated. "I listen. Outside classrooms, at the library window, sometimes on the street. People throw away books. I read what's left. I remember what I can." The honesty of her answer left the room still again. Gabriel turned a page, reading lines written in neat but uneven script. One sentence stopped him. "The smallest kindness can build a bridge no storm can wash away." He closed the notebook gently. "And you taught my daughter?" Amara nodded. "She wanted to learn. I wanted to teach. That's all." Alara squeezed her hand. "She's the best teacher I ever had." Gabriel looked at his daughter then, really looked, and saw the quiet confidence in her eyes. It was new. The sadness that had haunted her for months was gone, replaced by something lighter. He realized that what he'd mistaken for disobedience had only been loneliness. He leaned back, folding his hands. "Do you know what happens when someone trespasses on private property?" Amara swallowed. "They get punished." He tilted his head. "Maybe sometimes, but sometimes the law makes room for understanding." He looked at her again, voice softer now. "You remind me of someone I used to know, someone who believed in doing what was right even when no one was watching." There was a faint knock on the door. Mr. Clark stepped in, discreet as always. "Sir, Dr. Ofori has arrived for your consultation. Shall I send him away?" Gabriel shook his head. "No, send him in. Maybe it's time he met my daughter's tutor." The tall, kind-faced psychiatrist entered, carrying a small leather notebook. He nodded politely to the girls, then turned to Gabriel. "You called earlier about Alara's progress?" "Yes, doctor," Gabriel replied. "But perhaps the progress belongs to someone else entirely." He gestured toward Amara. "This is the one who's been teaching her." Dr. Ofori smiled warmly. "Ah, then I should thank you, young lady. You've done what trained adults have failed to do. You've reached her." Amara blushed. "I didn't do anything special." "Listening," the doctor said gently, "is the most special thing most people never learn." He glanced at Gabriel, lowering his voice slightly. "You see, this is what we call a trauma-informed response, not punishment, but understanding. She didn't cross a line for mischief. She crossed it for meaning." Gabriel nodded slowly, letting the truth settle in. The room, once a fortress of authority, felt suddenly smaller, like it had been holding its breath for too long. He turned to Amara again. "Where is your family?" Amara hesitated. "My mother's sick," she said quietly. "She forgets things. I take care of her." "And your father?" She shook her head. "I never met him." Gabriel stood and walked toward the window. Outside, the mango tree glowed in the fading sun, its leaves trembling in the light breeze. "You've been teaching under that tree," he said, almost to himself. "The same tree my wife loved to sit under before she passed away." He turned back to her, his voice lower now. "You gave my daughter back her smile, Amara. Do you know what that's worth?" Amara looked down. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't," he said gently. "You reminded us what kindness looks like. He placed her notebook back in her hands. "Keep this safe. It belongs to the future, not the trash." Then he crouched slightly, looking her in the eyes. "Tell me, where is your mother now?" The question lingered like an open door. Amara's throat tightened. "Near the market," she whispered. "She stays close to the buses. I can take you there." Gabriel exchanged a glance with Dr. Ofori, who nodded. "I'll come with you," Gabriel said, "but not as an investigator, as a man who wants to understand." Amara exhaled, a long-held breath finally released. "Does this mean she's not in trouble?" Gabriel smiled faintly. "If learning is a crime, then perhaps I'm guilty too." The clock ticked again, soft, rhythmic, certain. Outside, a bird settled on the branch of the mango tree, and the world, for a brief moment, felt balanced between sorrow and grace. Amara didn't yet understand what this conversation would change, or how it would rewrite the course of her life. But as Gabriel opened the door and motioned for her to follow, she knew one thing for sure. This time, when someone said they wanted to see her world, they truly meant it. The drive toward the market was slow, the kind of slow that forces silence to speak first. The city rolled past the car windows in layers, streets that glittered near the mansions, then cracked concrete, then the quiet ache of places forgotten by time. Gabriel sat in the back seat beside Amara, the hum of the engine the only sound between them. Amara had wanted to come, but he had asked her to stay. "This isn't a punishment," he told her. "It's a beginning. Let me understand her story before I bring you into it." Dr. Ofori sat in the front passenger seat, glancing occasionally at the rearview mirror. "You seem calm," he said softly to Amara. "I'm used to people looking," she replied. "They always do before they decide what I am." Gabriel turned his head slightly. "And what do they decide?" "That I'm trouble," she said, her voice steady but quiet. "That I don't belong anywhere for long." He said nothing for a while, only watching her reflection in the window, the face of a child who had learned to answer like an adult. Outside, the polished storefronts gave way to narrow alleys, walls stained by years of rain. The car stopped near the marketplace, where the smell of fruit, dust, and diesel mixed into something both sharp and familiar. Amara stepped out first. The soles of her feet met the warm ground with a kind of memory. She pointed toward a corner beneath an old awning where a woman sat on a crate, humming softly to herself. "That's her," she said. Naomi Nia looked smaller than Gabriel had imagined. Her hair was streaked with gray, though her face was young. Her eyes far away as she traced circles on the ground with a stick. Her clothes hung loosely, washed by rain more often than by water. Yet there was something gentle in the way she rocked slightly as she hummed, a rhythm older than words. Amara approached slowly. "Mama," she whispered, kneeling beside her. "It's me." Naomi blinked, her gaze struggling to find focus, then her expression softened. "My Amara," she said faintly. "You've been studying again?" "Yes, Mama," Amara said, her voice breaking. "I've been learning." Naomi smiled. "Good girl. You always were a good girl." Then her eyes drifted away again, back into whatever world her mind now called home. Gabriel and Dr. Ofori stood a few steps behind, watching quietly. The doctor lowered his voice. "Schizophrenia, likely untreated. It's remarkable she's survived this long. She needs care, a safe place, medication, routine." Gabriel nodded, the weight of the words sinking in. "Can she recover?" "With the right environment and treatment, she can stabilize," Dr. Ofori said gently. maybe even find fragments of herself again, but it will take time and trust. Amara looked up at them, sensing the conversation without hearing it. "You won't take her away, will you?" she asked. "No," Gabriel said. "Not away. Somewhere safe. Somewhere she can rest." Naomi's humming grew louder for a moment. She turned toward him suddenly, eyes clearer than before. "You look like someone who once knew peace," she said, her voice trembling. Gabriel froze. "Maybe I did," he said quietly. They took Naomi to a small private clinic that evening. The nurses spoke softly, offering her tea instead of questions. Dr. Ofori stayed to sign papers, explaining every line to Amara as if she were his equal. "This paper just says they'll give her a warm bed," he said. "This one makes sure you can visit whenever you like." Amara nodded solemnly. "I'll come every day." Gabriel placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll make sure of that." When they stepped back outside, the sky had turned deep blue, stars appearing between slow-moving clouds. Amara looked up. "She used to tell me that stars are the lamps of people who never forget to care," she said softly. Gabriel followed her gaze. "Then maybe tonight she has one of her own." They drove home in near silence, but it wasn't the heavy kind anymore. It was the kind that heals. The city lights flickered across the windshield, and somewhere between the glow and the dark, Gabriel spoke again. "You said you listened to lessons from behind fences." "Yes," Amara replied. "Then perhaps it's time you listened from a desk instead." She blinked in surprise. "You mean?" He smiled faintly. "We'll talk tomorrow, but I don't believe learning should depend on luck." When they returned to the mansion, Ilara was waiting at the gate, worry written across her face. She ran toward them. "Is she okay? Did you find her?" Amara nodded. "She's safe now. The doctor said she just needs rest." Ilara's shoulders dropped in relief. "I'm glad." Then she looked up at her father, uncertain. "And you?" Gabriel looked at both of them. "I'm learning something new too," he said. "That sometimes the right thing to do is the simplest one." He turned to Amara. "From now on, no more hiding. If you're going to teach my daughter, you'll do it where everyone can see." Her mouth fell, open. "You want me to?" "Yes," he said. "Officially, properly. You'll both learn from each other, and you'll have every book you could ever want." Amara stared at him, unsure whether to believe. "But people will talk." "Let them," Gabriel said, his tone steady. "Sometimes people need to see what fairness looks like." Dr. Ofori smiled approvingly. "A wise decision, Mr. Ross. You've just turned judgment into opportunity." Later that night, when the house had gone quiet, Gabriel stood alone by the window of his study. The city stretched before him, vast, glittering, indifferent. Yet somewhere beyond those lights, in a clinic room with clean sheets and steady breathing, Naomi Naya was finally safe. And downstairs, 2 children were likely whispering lessons again, their laughter rising softly through the marble floors. He looked at the notebook Amara had left on his desk. On the last page, a new line had appeared, written in her careful, uneven script. "Kindness is not charity. It's remembering that everyone belongs somewhere." Gabriel traced the words with his thumb, then closed the notebook gently. "You're right, Amara," he said to the quiet room. "And maybe this is where you belong." Outside, the mango tree stirred in the night breeze, its branches rustling like applause. Soft, almost imperceptible, but endless. Morning crept in quietly, a pale light stretching across the marble floors of the Ross estate. Gabriel stood by the window, looking out at the fading mist above the garden. He had barely slept. The memory of Amara's trembling voice, "She stays near the market, close to the buses," had looped through his mind all night. Behind that small sentence was a lifetime he did not yet understand. He picked up his jacket from the chair and called for Samuel, the driver. "We'll leave early," he said. "No escort, no publicity, just us." Samuel nodded, respectful and discreet as always. Within the hour, the car was ready. The morning air smelled faintly of rain, carrying the metallic scent of city pavement after a storm. Amara sat in the back seat, hands folded over the notebook she never went anywhere without. Gabriel noticed how she held it, not like a possession, but like something living. As they drove, the city changed its skin. The wide, clean avenues near the estate narrowed into streets crowded with vendors setting up their stalls. People shouted greetings in familiar rhythms. Dogs barked at passing bicycles, and somewhere a radio played an old tune that seemed to know everyone's name. Gabriel rolled down the window just slightly. "Is this where you used to live?" he asked. Amara nodded. "Near the station. My mother liked it there because she could watch the buses come and go. She said one day we'd get on one and not come back." He glanced at her. "Did you believe her?" "I still do," Amara said softly. "Just maybe not the way she meant it." Samuel slowed the car at a busy intersection. "We're close," Amara said, pointing toward a row of old tin-roofed shelters. They got out, and the noise of the street fell over them like a wave. Vendors calling prices, children chasing one another, the rustle of fabric from stalls hung with bright scarves. Amara led the way through a narrow alley, her steps sure despite the uneven ground. She stopped near an abandoned bus stop, its paint faded, the benches cracked. "She stays here when it rains," she whispered. And there, in the shadow of the old market awning, sat Naomi Naya. Her thin hands moved slowly over the ground, drawing circles in the dust with a twig. Her hair fell over her face, and her lips moved to a tune only she could hear. When she looked up, her eyes seemed to search for a memory and find only the echo of it. Amara knelt beside her. "Mama," she said, voice trembling. "It's me." Naomi blinked, her expression flickering between confusion and recognition. "Amara," she murmured, "you're late for school." "I know," Amara whispered, tears filling her eyes. "But I came to bring you somewhere better." Gabriel stood a few steps back, the air tightening around his chest. The world of stocks and speeches, the controlled meetings and tidy contracts, all of it felt distant here, small. He was watching a kind of love that didn't need words, a love that had survived on crumbs and courage. Naomi smiled faintly, touching Amara's cheek. "You grew taller," she said. "Only a little," Amara replied, smiling through tears. "Mama, this man wants to help us." Naomi turned to look at Gabriel. Her eyes, though clouded, held a strange clarity. "You look like someone who remembers things that hurt," she said softly. Gabriel froze. The words struck deeper than he expected. "Maybe I do," he said quietly. Naomi nodded, as if that answer was enough. She went back to her circles, humming a low tune. Dr. Ofori arrived shortly after, carrying a small medical bag and a voice full of calm. He crouched beside Naomi, speaking gently, explaining everything before he moved an inch. "We'll take you somewhere with a soft bed and warm meals," he said. "No one will take your daughter away. You'll rest. That's all." Naomi didn't resist. When the nurse from the nearby clinic offered her hand, she took it with surprising ease. Amara walked beside her as they made their way back to the car, whispering small reassurances, stories about mango trees, about poems and silver spoons, stories meant to remind her mother that the world was still capable of being kind. At the clinic, the air smelled faintly of soap and chamomile. The nurses spoke softly, their movements practiced and gentle. They gave Naomi a blanket the color of dawn and a small cup of tea, which she held carefully, as if afraid it might vanish. Dr. Ofori filled out the paperwork, his voice steady as he explained each page. She'll be assessed today, then start medication tomorrow. The treatment will help her rest, and it will quiet the loops in her mind. He looked at Amara. Do you know what that means? It means she can stop being afraid, Amara said. Yes, the doctor nodded. And maybe remember how to hope again. Gabriel listened, his arms crossed loosely, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to the doctor. Is there a chance she'll recover? With care, yes, Ofori said. Stability comes slowly, but it comes. As the sun dipped lower, Naomi fell asleep under the clinic's soft light. Amara sat beside her, refusing to move, tracing her mother's hand with her own. Gabriel watched them from the doorway, the rhythm of their breathing syncing with the gentle hum of machines. He felt something inside him, something he hadn't felt since before his wife died, an awareness that compassion wasn't a weakness, but a form of strength he had forgotten how to use. Later, as they left the clinic, Amara turned to him. Thank you, she said simply. People don't usually stop. Gabriel smiled faintly. Maybe they just forget where to look. She tilted her head. And you didn't? I almost did, he admitted. But your voice brought me back. The ride home was quiet. Outside the window, the streets glowed in the fading orange light. Vendors packed up their stalls, children called to one another, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. Amara watched the world pass. Her reflection ghosted on the glass. For the first time in years, the word tomorrow didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a promise. When they reached the estate, the house lights shimmered gently through the trees. Gabriel looked toward the mango tree before stepping inside. Its branches swayed slightly, whispering in the wind as if they already knew what had happened. He took a deep breath, the air carrying the faint scent of its fruit, and for the first time in a long while, it didn't smell of wealth or distance. It smelled of home. When they returned from the clinic, twilight had already folded itself over the estate. The house glowed faintly against the sky, each window lit like a quiet lantern. Amara followed Gabriel through the hallway, her footsteps tentative on the marble floor. She had been here before, but this time was different. She wasn't a trespasser or a curiosity. She was a guest. The air no longer felt heavy with judgment. It felt like something new, something she couldn't name yet. Mr. Clark met them at the door. Everything's prepared, sir, he said softly. The guest room, as requested. He gave Amara a small nod, polite and cautious but kind. Welcome, Miss Nia. Amara blinked at the title. No one had ever called her Miss before. It sounded strange and warm at the same time. She looked up at Gabriel. I can stay here? For a while, he said. Until your mother is stronger. You'll visit her at the clinic every few days, and Dr. Ofori will guide us both. She nodded, gripping her notebook tighter. She'll get better, right? Gabriel met her eyes, his voice steady. No harm will come to your mother, Amara. That's my promise to you. He didn't say it like a businessman making a deal. He said it like someone who had finally learned that some promises aren't meant to be profitable. They're meant to be kept. He led her upstairs to a small guest room overlooking the garden. It wasn't grand, but it was peaceful. A single lamp sat on a wooden desk beside a freshly made bed. The curtains fluttered slightly in the evening breeze. On the desk lay a new set of notebooks, pencils, and a single folded note that read, "For your next chapter." Amara traced the words with her fingertips. She didn't know whether to cry or laugh, so she did neither. She simply stood there, letting the strangeness of safety settle into her bones. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Amara poked her head in. "You're here," she said, grinning. "I asked Dad if you could eat with us tonight." Amara's instinct was to decline. She had eaten in kitchens, alleys, even on rooftops, but never at a table with someone like Gabriel Ross. Yet Alara's smile made it impossible to refuse. Downstairs, the dining room glowed with soft light. The long table that once intimidated her now looked less like a wall and more like a bridge. Amara pulled her to the seat beside her. "This is the best part," she whispered. "Martha's soup. It tastes like warmth." Gabriel joined them a moment later. The silence that usually ruled his meals had changed. It felt expectant, like a room holding its breath before laughter. Amara kept her eyes lowered, uncertain which spoon to use, until Amara nudged her gently. "Here," she whispered, handing her the smaller one. "For soup." Amara lifted the silver spoon carefully. Its weight surprised her. When she tasted the soup, she froze. It wasn't just the flavor. It was what it meant. It was the first time she had ever eaten with something that wasn't borrowed, broken, or made of tin. The spoon gleamed under the chandelier's light, catching a reflection of her face that almost looked like someone new. She smiled without meaning to. Amara noticed. "Good?" Amara nodded. "It's different. It tastes like dignity." Gabriel looked up, and for the first time, truly smiled. "That's the best compliment Martha's ever had." The meal continued quietly. Amara talked about school, about how she had to redo a reading test, and Amara helped her remember the structure of a paragraph. Gabriel listened without interrupting, his gaze moving between them, the corners of his mouth softening. He realized that the house no longer echoed with emptiness. It sounded like family again. After dinner, Amara led Amara to her room. "I want you to stay here," she said, pulling out an extra blanket. "We can talk until we fall asleep." "But you already have a bed," Amara said, confused. "Exactly," Amara replied. "And you don't. So now you do." They lay on opposite sides of the bed, the lamplight painting gold across the sheets. "What did your dad say to you today?" Amara asked sleepily. "He said my mother will be safe." "And do you believe him?" Amara paused. "I think I do. He's the first grown-up whose eyes didn't look away when I talked." "That means something," Amara said. "When people look at you, really look, it means they see you." Amara smiled. "You've been reading too much poetry." "You taught me that," Amara murmured. Within minutes, Amara drifted to sleep, her breathing slow and even. Amara stayed awake longer, tracing shapes in the air with her finger, the same way her mother used to. The shapes weren't circles now. They were lines leading somewhere new. She whispered into the dark, "We're safe, Mama. We're really safe." Downstairs, and Gabriel stood by the library window, a glass of water untouched beside him. He looked toward the mango tree, its branches glowing faintly in the moonlight. For years, that tree had been just another part of the garden. Now it felt like the heart of something larger, a place where learning had replaced fear where two worlds had quietly met halfway. Dr. Ofori's words from earlier echoed in his mind. A safe environment isn't a luxury. It's the soil where trust begins to grow. Gabriel smiled at the thought. Maybe that was true for adults too. Before going to bed, he walked past the guest room and paused. Through the half-open door, he saw them, the two girls asleep under the same lamp. Ilara's arm was draped across Amara's shoulder, their hair mingling on the pillow, one golden, one dark. The light from the lamp fell over their faces like a quiet blessing. He stood there for a long moment. Then, in a whisper meant for no one, he said, "You've done enough surviving, Amara. From now on, you live." He turned off the hallway light, leaving only the glow from their room. The house felt different now. The silence was no longer empty. It was peaceful. Outside, the night wind brushed against the mango tree, and somewhere in the clinic across town, Naomi Nia stirred in her sleep, a faint smile tracing her lips, as if she could sense that her child had finally found her way home. The next morning began with a silence so perfect that it almost felt fragile. Then, as the sun rose higher, the quiet fractured into the soft hum of movement. Breakfast trays clinking, doors opening, the gentle laughter of two children reviewing yesterday's lessons. For the first time in years, the Ross estate sounded alive. But outside its gates, the world had already found a way to turn that life into noise. By midday, the first headline appeared on a gossip site. Billionaire shelters. Homeless girl? Good deed or scandal? Within hours, others followed, each more dramatic than the last. Photographers gathered by the front gate, lenses ready, hoping to capture a face, a reaction, a story worth selling. The very thing that had been sacred, the quiet dignity of a promise, was suddenly currency in a market that never cared for truth. Inside the mansion, Amara sat by the window with Ilara, helping her prepare for a school presentation. "It's about courage," Ilara explained. "We're supposed to give examples from real life." Amara smiled faintly. "You already know one." Ilara laughed. "I can't talk about you in front of everyone. They'd never believe it." "Then tell them about the mango tree," Amara said. "They don't need to know who sat beneath it." Downstairs, Gabriel watched the news silently. The reports weren't cruel, not yet, but they were invasive. He saw words like charity and publicity stunt thrown across screens, stripping the humanity out of what had happened. He turned off the television and sat for a long while thinking. He had spent years guarding his reputation, every statement carefully written, every photo rehearsed. But this story was different. It wasn't a headline to manage. It was a truth to protect. Mr. Clark appeared at the door. "Sir, there are journalists outside," he said. "They're asking for a statement." Gabriel nodded slowly. "Then we'll give them one." He stepped out to the garden, where cameras had already gathered near the gate. Reporters called his name, voices overlapping like waves. "Mr. Ross, is it true you've taken in a street girl? Is she connected to your foundation? What will this mean for your family image?" He raised a hand, and the crowd quieted. His voice, when he spoke, was calm but carried weight. "You've all heard different versions of one story," he said. "Let me tell you the truth. The girl you're asking about, Amara Nia, is not a thief, not a burden, not a symbol. She is a teacher. She taught my daughter what no school or fortune ever could. That kindness is not weakness, and that courage can look like a child with a notebook and no shoes." The crowd went silent. Even the clicking of cameras slowed. replaced by the hush that follows something honest. "You want to know why she's here?" Gabriel continued. "Because when we saw her, we remembered what it means to be human. That's the story. And if you write it right." He turned away before they could ask more questions. Behind him, a few reporters lowered their cameras, ashamed. One of them, a woman with a notepad tucked beneath her arm, followed him quietly toward the gate. "Mr. Ross," she said, "my name is Ivy Grant. I write for the Chronicle. I'd like to get this story right, if you'll let me." Gabriel studied her for a moment. She wasn't pushy. Her tone carried respect. "If you're here to understand, not to exploit, then you're welcome," he said. That afternoon, Ivy met with the family in the garden. She asked gentle questions: how Amara and Alara met, what they had learned from each other, how Naomi was recovering. She never once used the word pity. When she asked to see the mango tree, Amara smiled shyly and led her there. Ivy took one look at the carved initials on the trunk, AN and EQ side by side, and whispered, "Some stories write themselves." Later that evening, her article appeared online under the title, "The Girl Who Taught the Billionaire's Daughter." It wasn't written like gossip, it was written like a prayer. She described Amara's strength without romanticizing her pain, Naomi's recovery without exaggeration, and Gabriel's transformation without turning him into a saint. The last line read, "In a world quick to build fences, sometimes all it takes is one child brave enough to climb them." The article spread quietly at first, then widely. Comments poured in. Parents, teachers, even children, sharing their own stories of second chances. One person wrote, "I was that child once. I wish someone had listened the way he did." Another said, "Maybe the world isn't as heartless as we think." Inside the house, Alara showed the article to Amara on a tablet. "You're famous," she said. Amara frowned. "I don't want to be famous." Alara grinned. "Too late. Your hope on the internet now." Amara shook her head, laughing softly. "Hope doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to everyone who decides to care." Gabriel overheard them and smiled quietly from the doorway. For years he had measured success in numbers, reports, market shares. Now he was learning that sometimes success is as simple as seeing someone become who they were always meant to be. That night, before bed, Amara wrote in her notebook, "When people talk, let them. The truth doesn't need to shout to be heard." She underlined it twice, then added, "Today, the world looked at us and saw something kind." Outside, the mango tree swayed gently under the moonlight, as if nodding in agreement. Somewhere, a breeze carried Ivy Grant's printed article through the city, a single page fluttering loose from a newspaper, landing near the very clinic where Naomi slept. A nurse passing by picked it up and smiled. "Look at that," she murmured. The world remembered her. And in a quiet hospital room, as if hearing that unspoken truth, Naomi Naya opened her eyes, humming the same lullaby she had once sung to her daughter beneath the mango tree. It was a tune about circles, about how everything lost eventually finds its way back home. The news had changed everything. Within a week, Amara's name became a whisper that floated through classrooms, boardrooms, and living rooms alike. Some called her lucky, others called her bold. But for those who had watched the footage of Gabriel's calm press conference, she became something else. A quiet symbol of what fairness could look like if people stopped judging before listening. Still, not everyone understood. At Queen's Crest Academy, the teachers moved more carefully now, their eyes flicking toward the mango tree whenever they passed the garden. The headmistress, Mrs. Davenport, found herself waking up earlier each morning, rehearsing what she might say if she ever had to explain her part in the incident. Her pride told her to stay silent. Her conscience disagreed. And so, a meeting was called. A formal school board hearing, private but important. It would decide whether Amara could officially study at Queen's Crest, and whether the staff's handling of the earlier incident had violated the school's own code of ethics. The hearing took place in the assembly hall, a space usually filled with laughter and morning announcements. That day, it was filled with tension. Rows of polished chairs faced a long table where the board members sat, papers neatly stacked in front of them. Gabriel Ross entered quietly, wearing a simple suit rather than the polished armor of his corporate persona. Behind him walked Amara, holding Alara's hand, and Ms. Rivera, the liaison officer who had become a quiet champion for the girl. When they arrived, Mrs. Davenport stood. Her hands shook slightly as she spoke. "Mr. Ross, Miss Naya, Gabriel raised a hand. "We're not here for apologies," he said softly. "We're here for understanding." The chairman cleared his throat. "This hearing concerns the matter of an unregistered individual accessing school property. However, due to the unique circumstances and public attention, we are considering alternative resolutions." Ms. Rivera smiled politely. "With respect, this isn't just about property," she said. "It's about access to education, to dignity, to opportunity. Under national law, children experiencing homelessness or instability have the right to an uninterrupted education." She spoke calmly, without quoting sections or numbers, translating the law into language that even the youngest listener could feel. "The rule is simple," she said. "No child should lose the chance to learn because of where they sleep at night." The board murmured in quiet agreement. Amara sat still, listening. It felt strange to hear people speak about her life as if it were part of something official, written down somewhere she could never see. For years, her existence had been undocumented, invisible. Now, suddenly, it was being recognized, almost validated, by people in suits. Gabriel leaned forward. "If I may," he said. "This isn't about charity, it's about justice. My daughter learned more under that tree than she ever did in a classroom. Not because of the teachers, but because of what Amara brought. Empathy, resilience, and the ability to see through the noise. I want to sponsor a scholarship in her name, not for her alone, but for others like her, children whose brilliance doesn't come with privilege." The room grew still. Even Mrs. Davenport lowered her eyes, humbled. "You would fund this personally?" one of the board members asked. "Yes," Gabriel replied. "Completely. It will cover tuition, materials, and counseling for any student identified by Ms. Rivera's office. Let it be called the Mango Tree Scholarship." Ilara squeezed Amara's hand under the table. Amara looked down, trying not to cry. She had never heard her name associated with something bigger than survival. Mrs. Davenport finally spoke. "I owe you both an apology," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "I judged without knowing. That is not what education stands for." She turned to Amara. "You reminded us that learning is not just about books, it's about humility. I hope you'll give me a chance to do better." Amara nodded gently. "Thank you," she said. "I just wanted to learn. That's all I ever wanted." The chairman cleared his throat again, softer this time. "Then it's settled. Miss Amara Nia will be granted full admission to Queen's Crest Academy with immediate effect, and the scholarship will be established under her name." He paused, smiling faintly. Perhaps our school has learned something too. There was quiet applause, polite at first, then warm. The sound filled the hall in slow waves, soft but powerful. Ilara hugged Amara tightly. "Now we'll sit in the same classroom," she whispered. "No more fences." Gabriel watched them, his expression caught somewhere between pride and gratitude. When the applause faded, he leaned toward Ms. Rivera. "You did this," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No, Mr. Ross, she did. You just listened." Outside, sunlight fell over the courtyard where students gathered during recess. News of the decision spread faster than any rumor before it. Some students smiled. Others seemed uncertain, uncomfortable with the shift in balance. But one thing was undeniable. The fence that had once divided the privileged from the forgotten now looked smaller, less necessary. That afternoon, Amara and Ilara walked together across the school grounds. For the first time, Amara carried her books through the front gate instead of sneaking around the back. The guard who once chased her away nodded respectfully. "Good afternoon, Miss Nia," he said. She smiled, remembering how those same words used to belong to other people. "Good afternoon," she replied, her voice steady. In class, she sat beside Ilara. Their teacher, the same one who had once shut the window on her listening, smiled awkwardly but sincerely. "Welcome, Amara," she said. "Would you like to read for us today?" Amara opened her notebook to a clean page and began softly. "Belonging isn't a place you find. It's what happens when someone finally lets you stay." When she finished, there was silence. The kind of silence that doesn't need applause to mean something. That evening, as they walked home together, Ilara asked, "So how does it feel to be official?" Amara thought for a moment. "It feels like homework," she said. "Hard at first, but worth it." Ilara laughed so loudly that even Gabriel, waiting at the gate, could hear it. "I'll remind you, you said that when you get your first exam," he teased. "Deal," Amara said, smiling. Behind them, the mango tree caught the fading sunlight, its leaves glowing gold, as if the world itself were quietly clapping for them. The clinic where Naomi stayed stood on the quiet edge of the city, where the hum of traffic softened into the rustle of trees. The building itself was small, painted a calm shade of green that seemed to breathe. It didn't smell of antiseptic the way hospitals often did. It smelled faintly of tea, soap, and something softer, like rest. It had been 3 weeks since Gabriel and Amara had brought Naomi there, and the change was slow but steady. The doctors didn't promise miracles. They promised time, patience, and care, and somehow that was enough. Each visit Amara made, she noticed something new. A little more focus in her mother's eyes, a steadier rhythm in her voice when she hummed, the beginnings of recognition flickering like light through a window half opened. That morning, Amara carried a small paper bag of gifts into the ward. Books, colored pencils, and one ripe mango wrapped carefully in tissue. "You brought fruit again," the nurse said kindly. "It's her favorite," Amara replied. "It reminds her of home." When she entered the room, Naomi was sitting upright, a sketch pad in her lap. Her fingers moved slowly, tracing outlines in soft pencil. She didn't look up immediately, but when Amara said, "Good morning," her hand stilled. Then, without turning her head, she whispered, "That voice. I know that voice." Amara smiled. "It's me, Mama." Naomi turned, her expression uncertain, fragile. Then, like a thread being gently pulled through a needle, recognition slipped back into her gaze. "Amara," she breathed. "You came again. Every day." Amara said softly. Naomi smiled faintly and gestured toward the paper on her lap. I've been drawing our house, she said, or what I remember of it. She showed Amara the page. The lines were shaky but deliberate. A doorway, a tree, a small figure holding a book. It wasn't a perfect drawing, but it was full of memory. Dr. Ofori, who had been observing quietly from the doorway, stepped inside. That's progress, he said gently. She's reconnecting through familiar images. Naomi looked at him curiously. Do I know you? He smiled. Not yet, but I'm one of the people helping you get better. She nodded slowly. Thank you. Then she turned to Amara again. And who's this kind man with you? Amara glanced toward Gabriel, who had just entered the room carrying a small bouquet of flowers. This is Mr. Ross, she said. He's helping us now. Naomi's eyes softened. You brought the sunlight with you? She said quietly. I can feel it again. Gabriel hesitated, then placed the flowers on the bedside table. Your daughter's been teaching me a few things too, he said. Amara always loved teaching, Naomi murmured, brushing her hand across the page. Even when we had nothing to eat, she'd explain the stars to me as if they were words she could pronounce. The room fell silent for a moment. Then Dr. Ofori broke it gently. Naomi's been improving steadily, he said. She's responding well to medication and therapy. We'll continue to monitor her, but I believe she'll reach stability soon. Amara's shoulders relaxed, a tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying easing at last. Can she come home soon? Not yet, Ofori said softly, but perhaps in time. Healing isn't about rushing. It's about remembering where it's safe to stand. Naomi reached for Amara's hand. You've grown, she whispered. You look so strong now. Are you happy? Amara nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. I am, and you will be too. Gabriel moved to the window, watching the soft sway of branches outside. The sound of leaves brushing against glass reminded him of the mango tree, of laughter and second chances. She'll always have a room of her own now, he said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. Naomi looked up at him. You speak like someone who knows what loneliness sounds like, she said. He met her gaze. I do. Then thank you for finding us, she said. The world forgets people like us sometimes. Not anymore, Gabriel said. Not if I can help it. The sunlight shifted, landing directly on Naomi's sketchbook. The drawing seemed to glow briefly, the lines alive. Naomi smiled faintly and began humming again, the same tune she had hummed at the bus stop. But this time, the sound was steady, full, like a lullaby finding its melody again. Amara opened the paper bag and placed the mango on the bedside table. For later, she said. It tastes better when it's shared. Naomi looked at it and nodded. Just like kindness. Dr. Ofori made a few notes in his chart, then turned to Gabriel. She's healing, he said quietly. Memories are coming back. Sometimes they return like sunlight through leaves, soft, scattered, but unmistakably there. Gabriel nodded. I think we all are, he said. Before leaving, Amara bent to kiss her mother's forehead. I'll bring more colors next time, she whispered. You can draw the mango tree. Naomi smiled. Only if you promise to show me the real one soon. I promise, Amara said. It's waiting for you. They left the room quietly, the echo of humming following them into the hallway. As they stepped outside, the afternoon air felt brighter, the city less heavy. For the first time, Amara didn't feel torn between two worlds, the streets she came from and the home she was moving toward. They were beginning to meet halfway. Back at the estate, Amara was waiting on the steps. "How's your mom?" she asked eagerly. "She's better," Amara said, smiling. "She's remembering." Amara clasped her hands together. "Good. Then maybe soon she can come here too." Amara looked toward the mango tree swaying gently in the wind. "Maybe," she said. "Maybe everything's finding its place." Gabriel watched them run toward the garden, their laughter floating upward through the warm air. For the first time in years, he felt something inside him loosen, like a door that had been locked too long finally creaking open. He realized that helping them had not been an act of charity. It had been a way of saving himself too. In the distance, the setting sun threw gold across the sky, turning the house, the garden, and the two girls into a single silhouette, a portrait of what healing looks like when it's finally allowed to bloom. A month later, the morning arrived with the scent of rain. It wasn't heavy, just a soft drizzle that seemed to bless rather than disturb. The air in the Ross estate carried a quiet anticipation, the kind that usually comes before beginnings. In the study, sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, landing on a single stack of papers placed neatly at the center of the table. Each page bore the weight of law, but the heart of the moment was far simpler. It was about belonging. Gabriel Ross stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, watching the clouds drift past the hills. He wasn't nervous, but his thoughts carried a solemn gravity. The documents before him were adoption papers, carefully reviewed, properly witnessed, waiting only for signatures. It had taken weeks of visits, assessments, and background checks. He'd answered every question about motivation, stability, and responsibility with quiet honesty. Yet the only question that truly mattered wasn't on paper. It was the one he kept asking himself. Can I be the kind of father she deserves? Outside, laughter floated from the garden. Amara and Alara were chasing each other under the mango tree, the same one that had witnessed everything, their first meeting, their fears, their lessons. From the window, Gabriel could hear fragments of their voices. "Run faster," Alara called. "I'm trying." Amara laughed. "You've had years of practice being free." Their laughter sounded like wind chimes, uneven but full of life. Gabriel smiled quietly. For so long, that sound had been missing from this house. Now it was the rhythm by which he measured time. A soft knock broke his thoughts. Mr. Clark stepped into the room, followed by Ms. Rivera, holding a leather folder, and Dr. Ofori, who had come as a witness and friend. "Everything is ready, sir," Ms. Rivera said. "We can begin when you're ready." Gabriel nodded and gestured for them to sit. The formalities began with gentle precision. Ms. Rivera explained each document in plain words, making sure everyone understood. "These forms confirm legal guardianship," she said. "Once signed, Amara will have full rights under your care: education, medical, and inheritance." She smiled at Amara, who sat quietly, hands folded in her lap. "In every sense, it will make you his daughter." Amara looked at Gabriel. "What if I'm not good at being one?" she asked. He chuckled softly. "There's no formula for being good at family, Amara. You just show up and care. The rest follows." Dr. Ofori leaned forward, his tone gentle. "Love isn't a contract," he said. "But sometimes, signing one helps the world recognize what the heart already knows." Ms. Rivera smiled. "Well said, doctor. Let's make it official." Gabriel picked up the pen. The first stroke of ink seemed to echo louder than any business deal he'd ever signed. He had signed mergers worth millions, contracts that spanned continents. But this one small movement of his hand, felt like the only signature that truly mattered. When he finished, he turned the papers toward Amara. Her hand trembled slightly as she held the pen. Amara reached over, whispering, "You're brave. Just write your name. You've earned it." Amara took a deep breath and began carefully. Amarania. Her handwriting was still uneven, but each letter stood tall. When she finished, everyone in the room seemed to exhale at once. Ms. Rivera smiled and stamped the final page. "Congratulations," she said softly. "It's done." Amara clapped her hands. "That means she's really my sister now, doesn't it?" Gabriel looked at her, warmth softening his voice. "Yes, Ilara. Sisters by choice and by heart." He turned back to Amara, his expression steady but full of something deeper than words. He knelt so their eyes met on the same level. "You don't need to call me sir anymore," he said. "You have a father now, if you'll let me be one." Amara blinked, stunned. For a heartbeat, she seemed unable to speak. Then she whispered, "I think I've been waiting for that sentence my whole life." Gabriel smiled and pulled her gently into an embrace. The moment was quiet. No applause, no grand music, just the soft sound of breathing, the sound of two lives aligning. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the sun began to push through the clouds, spilling light across the table. The papers glowed faintly in its warmth, as though the ink itself understood what it had just recorded. After the witnesses signed, the room relaxed into laughter. Dr. Ofori poured tea from the tray Mr. Clark had brought. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his cup. "To family," Ms. Rivera added. "To the mango tree," Ilara chimed in, grinning. Amara smiled shyly. "And to second chances." Gabriel nodded. "Especially those." Later, they all walked into the garden. The air was damp, the ground still soft from rain. Gabriel looked at the tree, the carved initials still visible on its trunk, AN and EQ, a record of friendship that had started everything. "You girls carved this?" he asked. Ilara laughed. "We wanted to make it official long before today." Amara ran her fingers over the letters. "It's not perfect," she said. Gabriel shook his head. "Perfection's overrated. Real things are better when they have fingerprints." The three of them stood beneath the tree, the sunlight filtering through its branches. Amara tilted her face upward, closing her eyes. "It's strange," she said softly. "For so long, I thought this tree belonged to the school. But now it feels like it belongs to everyone who's ever been kept out." Gabriel looked at her with quiet pride. "Then maybe that's what we should teach the world. Some doors don't need locks. They need welcome signs." As the afternoon faded, Ilara ran back inside to fetch Naomi's latest drawing from the clinic, a picture of the same tree with 3 figures standing beneath it. When she returned, Amara smiled through tears. "She's remembering us," she whispered. Gabriel took the drawing and studied it. "She's part of this too," he said. "No family is ever complete without the people who taught us how to love, even when they couldn't stay." They hung the drawing in the hallway that evening, beside the family portraits that had long felt unfinished. Now, finally, the wall looked whole. As night fell, the house filled with the soft sounds of home, footsteps, distant laughter, and the quiet rustle of leaves outside the window. In the study, the adoption papers rested under the lamp, the ink still fresh, the words still warm. In another room, Amara wrote a single sentence in her notebook before bed. "A family isn't something you're born into. It's something you help build, one promise at a time." She closed the notebook, smiling as she turned off the light. And in the darkness that followed, it was easy to imagine the mango tree outside breathing quietly, as though whispering its approval. Roots deep, branches wide, holding the memory of everything that had finally come home. The morning air held that faint chill that always comes before sunrise, when everything feels paused between night and day. In the Ross household, lights flickered on one by one, a quiet orchestra of beginnings. Down the hallway, Amara stood before the mirror in her new school uniform. The fabric was simple, pale blue with white trim, the same as every other student's. Yet it felt heavier than any cloth she had ever worn. It wasn't the weight of fabric, but of meaning. She turned slowly, checking the fit, smoothing the pleats of her skirt with careful hands. "It looks perfect," Amara said from behind her, yawning as she tied her own hair. Amara smiled. "It feels strange. I keep waiting for someone to tell me I can't wear it." Amara shook her head, grinning. "Well, they can't. You're officially one of us now." Downstairs, the smell of breakfast drifted through the air. Toast, cocoa, and something warm and sweet. Martha, the housekeeper, wiped her hands on her apron and looked up as the girls came down. "Ah, 2 scholars today," she said proudly. "The tree outside will be jealous." Amara laughed. She still wasn't used to mornings that started with laughter. Gabriel looked up from his newspaper and smiled when he saw her. "Good morning, Miss Naya," he said gently. "You look like you were born for that uniform." Amara hesitated, then said, "Thank you, Father." The word was small but powerful. Gabriel froze for just a second, then smiled, a real, quiet smile that reached his eyes. "You just made this the best morning I've had in years." They ate together, sunlight slipping through the windows in soft, golden streams. When it was time to leave, Samuel opened the car door, but Amara shook her head. "Can we walk just this once?" she asked. "It feels important." Gabriel nodded. "Of course." And so they did. The 2 girls walked side by side down the hill toward Queen's Crest Academy, the mansion fading behind them as the city awakened. Their steps crunched over gravel, matching in rhythm like a heartbeat. When they reached the familiar iron gates, Amara stopped. She had stood here so many times before, on the outside, watching. But today, for the first time, the gate was open. Amara nudged her gently. "Ready?" Amara took a deep breath. "I think so." They walked through together. Students in crisp uniforms turned their heads as they passed. A few whispered, but their voices sounded different now. Curious, not cruel. Some even smiled, hesitant but genuine. "That's her," someone murmured. "The girl from the article?" Another replied softly, "She's the one who taught Miss Ross under the mango tree." Amara's steps slowed for a moment, her heart thudding in her chest. But Amara slipped her arm through hers. "Let them talk," she whispered. "This time, they're talking because they see you." Inside, the corridors glowed with the morning sun streaming through stained glass windows. Colors scattered across the floor, red, blue, green, painting the students in patterns of light. Amara looked down and saw a small patch of gold resting on her hands. She smiled. Maybe this is what it feels like to be seen, she thought. Their first class was English literature. Mrs. Byrne, who had once looked startled to find Alara's mystery tutor hiding behind the greenhouse, now greeted them both warmly. "Welcome back, Miss Ross," she said. Then, turning to Amara, "And welcome home, Miss Nia." Amara's throat tightened. The word home had never belonged to her before. She managed a quiet "thank you" and took her seat. The lesson began with poetry. Mrs. Byrne wrote a line on the board. "Courage is not loud. It's the whisper that says try again tomorrow." She asked who wanted to read aloud. For a moment, no one moved. Then Amara raised her hand. Her voice, when she began, was soft but steady. Each word carried more than its meaning. It carried every night she had spent under streetlights, every lesson whispered through fences, every promise that learning would someday be hers. When she finished, the class was silent for a heartbeat. Then came the sound of hands clapping. Not everyone, not loudly, but enough to matter. Mrs. Byrne smiled. "Beautiful reading," she said. "You have a voice that makes words sound alive." After class, a few students approached Amara. One offered to share her notes. Another asked shyly if Amara could help with reading assignments. It wasn't friendship yet, but it was something close. The soft soil from which it could grow. At lunch, the two girls sat under the mango tree. The fence that had once divided this spot from the street was gone now, replaced by a low stone border lined with flowers. "They took it down last week," Amara explained. "Father said fences don't teach anything except fear." Amara smiled, running her fingers along the edge of the stone. "It looks better this way." "It does," Amara said, "like the world finally decided to breathe." They unpacked their lunchboxes, identical sandwiches, just as they had agreed. "No special meals," Amara had insisted. "If I'm part of the class, I eat like everyone else." Amara had grinned. "Except mine has extra peanut butter." Amara laughed. "That's favoritism." The bell rang, calling them back to the next lesson. As they stood, Amara looked once more at the mango tree, sunlight filtering through its branches. The leaves shimmered, and for a moment, she thought she heard her mother's voice. Not the lost, confused one, but the clear, steady tone that had once sung lullabies. "You did it, my Amara. You kept your promise." By the time the day ended, her shoes were dusty, her uniform slightly wrinkled, and her heart full. When she met Gabriel at the gate, he smiled. "So how was your first day?" She thought for a moment, then said, "Like finding the last missing page of a book I thought was lost." He nodded slowly. "Then keep reading. The story's only just begun." That evening, she placed her uniform neatly on the chair beside her bed before sleeping. The fabric still carried the scent of chalk and mango leaves. And as the night settled, she dreamed of classrooms full of light, of voices rising in laughter, of gates that stayed open, and of the quiet, steadfast rhythm of learning in a world that finally understood she belonged there. 2 months later, the afternoons at Queen's Crest had changed. The schoolyard, once filled only with polished shoes and pressed collars, now carried the soft rhythm of something new. A circle of children sitting cross-legged beneath the mango tree, reading aloud from books that had seen better days but still smelled of possibility. The Mango Tree Reading Circle, as Amara had named it, had begun as a small idea written in Amara's notebook. Now, it was real. It started one afternoon when Amara noticed a group of younger children waiting outside the school fence. Faces curious, hopeful, hungry for something more than food. They were children from the nearby neighborhoods, too poor to attend Queen's Crest, but drawn by the sound of laughter and the smell of chalk. Amara knew that look in their eyes. She had once been on their side of the fence. When she mentioned it to Amara, her sister grinned. "Then let's bring the lessons to them." Amara hesitated. "Do you think they'd listen to us?" "They'll listen to you," Amara said simply. "You're one of them, and you're one of us. That's exactly why it will work." The next day they spoke to Gabriel. He listened quietly, resting his elbows on the table as Amara explained her plan. Old books from the school library, open afternoons under the tree, 1 hour a week of reading and storytelling for local kids. She called it a place where words can rest safely. Gabriel didn't interrupt once. When she finished, he asked only one question. "Do you need my help?" Amara smiled shyly. "Just the chairs and the books. The rest we can build ourselves." He nodded. "Then you'll have both by morning." He kept his promise, of course, but he did it quietly. There was no press release, no photograph. The school gardener found extra benches stacked by the tree the next day, and someone had left a box of picture books labeled "For New Readers" from one who learned late. By the end of the week, 15 children came. By the next, there were 30. Word spread through the nearby market, through vendors and bus drivers, through neighbors who had once believed that the school gates would never open for their children. Each Saturday afternoon, the circle formed. Amara reading aloud, Ilara turning pages for those sitting close. Sometimes, a teacher or two would join, pretending to supervise, but often staying longer than planned. Laughter filled the air, mixed with the sound of pencils scratching and pages turning. The mango tree, once a symbol of secrecy and fear, had become the heart of the school. On one particular afternoon, Amara stood before the group holding up a book about a bird who couldn't fly. "Does anyone know what courage means?" she asked. A small boy raised his hand. "It's when you're scared, but you still do it," he said. Amara smiled. "Exactly. Courage is when your heart keeps walking, even when your feet are tired." She saw the children nod, eyes wide, taking it in. It reminded her of herself at their age, crouched behind windows and fences, trying to memorize words she couldn't afford to learn. Now, she was giving those words away freely, as if returning a gift that had once been loaned to her. Ilara passed around paper and crayons. "Draw what courage looks like," she said. Within minutes, the ground was filled with color. Birds, trees, houses, and people smiling. A girl with bright eyes drew a picture of two sisters sitting under a mango tree. When Amara asked who they were, the girl replied, "They're us, just a few years from now." That evening, when the children had gone, Amara and Ilara stayed behind to clean up. "Do you think it'll last?" Ilara asked. "It will," Amara said, "because it's theirs now." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Gabriel approached, carrying a small camera. "May I take a picture?" he asked. "Not for the papers, just for us." They stood under the mango tree, shoulders touching, smiling into the soft orange light. Behind them, the benches and books glowed like keepsakes of something that would continue long after the shutter clicked. Later that week, during a quiet Sunday dinner, Gabriel received a video call from abroad. The name on the screen made him pause. Auntie Lila Mensa. Amara gasped. She called. The woman's face appeared, older now, lines etched by both time and kindness. "My child," she said, voice trembling. "I saw the article online. The mango tree. You did it." Amara could barely speak. "You're the reason I ever believed in school," she said. "You gave me my first notebook." Lila smiled through tears. "And now you're giving notebooks to others. I'm so proud of you. You kept the circle going." After the call ended, the house felt full, not of sound, but of something larger. Completion. In the following weeks, teachers began volunteering to help with the reading circle. Some brought snacks, others donated old books. The project spread to nearby schools, and soon, Groups of children across the district were sitting under trees of their own. Gabriel watched quietly, never stepping into the spotlight. When someone asked if it was his foundation's work, he simply said, "It's Amara's idea. I'm just watering it." Dr. Ofori visited one Saturday and stood by the fence, observing the laughter and reading. "Do you see what this is?" he said softly to Gabriel. "It's proof that healing doesn't end with the person. It continues through what they create." Gabriel nodded. "She's teaching us all over again how to build hope from the ground up." As the weeks passed, Amara kept a small ledger of attendance and notes. She didn't call it data. She called it stories in numbers. The children's progress wasn't measured by test scores, but by the way their voices grew steadier each week. The shy ones began reading aloud. The restless ones learned patience. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And sometimes, that's all the world needs to change. One evening, after the final class of the day, Amara closed her notebook and sat beneath the mango tree, looking at the fading sky. Ilara joined her, sitting cross-legged beside her. "Do you think Auntie Lila will ever come visit?" Ilara asked. Amara smiled. "Maybe, but even if she doesn't, her kindness already did." The breeze moved gently through the leaves, carrying the faint sounds of children's laughter from the distance. Echoes of learning, of growing, of hope renewing itself in small, steady breaths. And for a long while, neither of them spoke. They just sat together beneath the same tree that had once been a secret and was now a sanctuary. Proof that some places, when cared for, can grow roots deeper than memory. It was a Sunday morning, thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth. The clinic garden shimmered with dew, the kind of quiet beauty that arrives after long storms. Gabriel parked the car beneath the tall jacaranda trees, and Amara leaned forward in her seat, gazing toward the path that led to her mother's ward. She held a small paper bag in her hands. Inside, a ripe mango, bright as sunlight. "She's better today," Dr. Ofori said from the passenger seat, turning with a reassuring smile. "She's been asking for you all week." Amara clutched the paper bag tighter. "She remembers me now?" "She does," the doctor said softly. "She may not remember every detail, but she remembers love, and that's the best kind of memory to start with." They walked slowly through the garden. Ilara ran ahead, her laughter bouncing between the hedges. Gabriel followed a few steps behind, his usual calm softened by anticipation. The last time he had seen Naomi Nia, she had been fragile, like paper left too long in the rain. Now, as they neared the benches near the fountain, he could already hear her humming, the same lullaby Amara used to whisper to herself at night. Naomi was sitting beneath a bougainvillea trellis, a shawl draped over her shoulders, her fingers tracing gentle circles on her knee. When she saw them, her humming stopped. Her gaze flicked to Amara and stayed there. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Naomi whispered, almost as if afraid the sound might break the spell, "You kept your promise." Amara's breath caught. "Mama," she said, her voice trembling, "I told you I'd come back for you." Naomi rose slowly, uncertain at first, then sure, like a bird remembering how to fly. She stepped forward and pulled Amara into her arms. It wasn't a cinematic embrace. No grand music, no tears streaming down faces. Just a long, quiet holding, two heartbeats aligning. The wind moved through the garden as if pausing to listen. Gabriel turned away for a moment, giving them the privacy that sacred things deserve. Ilara slipped her hand into his. "She really remembers," Ilara whispered. He nodded, his eyes bright. Sometimes the mind forgets, he said, but the heart keeps the address. Dr. Ofori watched from nearby, smiling to himself. He didn't interrupt. He knew that healing often required silence, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence that allows love to fill the air. Naomi pulled back at last, her hands cupping Amara's face. "You've grown so much," she said softly. "You look like strength." Amara laughed through her tears. "You look like peace." "I didn't think I'd see this day," Naomi whispered. "I did," Amara replied. "Every night." They sat together on the garden bench, their fingers intertwined. Amara took the mango from the paper bag and placed it gently in her mother's palm. "For you," she said. "The first one from our tree this season." Naomi's eyes widened. "Our tree?" "Yes," Amara said with a smile. "It's still waiting for you." Naomi lifted the fruit to her nose and inhaled deeply. "It smells like the past," she said, "but sweeter." Nearby, Gabriel and Alara watched in silence. He placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "You see that?" he said quietly. "That's what healing looks like. Not loud, not sudden, but steady." Alara smiled. "Like reading one page every day until the story makes sense again." He nodded. "Exactly." Dr. Ofori joined them, his tone gentle. "Family support changes everything," he said. "Medication steadies the mind, but love steadies the soul. She's responding beautifully." Gabriel looked at him. "She'll be able to come home?" "Eventually," Ofori replied. "Not to the same life, but to a new one. And sometimes that's even better." In the garden, Amara helped her mother peel the mango with a small knife. Naomi's hands were slow, trembling slightly, but sure enough to finish the task. She offered the first slice to her daughter. "You first," she said, smiling. Amara took it, tasting the sweetness. It was the same fruit they had once shared under tarps and market roofs, but now it tasted different. Less like survival, more like victory. Naomi watched her carefully. "You seem happy." "I am," Amara said. "I go to school every day now. Ilara's there with me. We started a reading circle for other kids. We teach under a tree." Naomi's eyes softened. "You became the teacher you were meant to be." "I think so," Amara whispered. "You always told me I could learn anything." Naomi smiled, and I was right. For a while, they said nothing more. The world around them seemed to slow. Bees drifted between flowers. A nurse pushed a cart across the path, the small wheels making rhythmic sounds like a lullaby's heartbeat. Finally, Naomi leaned back, closing her eyes. "Do you remember the song I used to sing?" she asked. Amara nodded. "Always." "Then sing with me." Their voices rose softly together, humming a tune that floated through the clinic garden, the song that had carried them through hunger, fear, and silence. The melody was simple, only a few notes, looping again and again, like the sound of faith refusing to fade. Gabriel stood quietly, his hand still resting on Alara's shoulder. "We'll leave them for a bit," he said softly. "They've earned this moment." They walked toward the car, but neither spoke. Behind them, the humming continued. Two voices, one older, one younger, weaving through the wind. It wasn't perfect harmony, but it didn't need to be. It was real. When they reached the gate, Alara looked back one last time. "She's smiling," she said. "Her mother, I mean. She looks free." Gabriel nodded. "Freedom doesn't always come from leaving. Sometimes it comes from being found." The drive home was quiet, filled with the kind of silence that feels sacred. The city passed by slowly, its sounds muffled beneath the soft hum of tires on wet roads. In the back seat, Amara leaned against the window, holding her mother's drawing, the one of the mango tree, close to her chest. At a stoplight, Gabriel glanced in the mirror. The reflection caught all of them together. Ilara asleep against his shoulder, Amara clutching the drawing, and himself in between, the light from the street lamps flickering across their faces. For the first time, he realized they weren't three separate lives anymore. They were one story, written in different handwriting, but bound in the same book. When they reached home, the house lights glowed warmly through the rain. Gabriel stepped out and looked back at the road disappearing into darkness. Somewhere, miles away, Naomi Nia was asleep, safe, dreaming under the same sky. And for the first time, he didn't feel the need to fix anything. Everything was already healing, quietly, on its own. The morning of the ceremony came with a brightness that seemed deliberate, as though the sky itself had been saving its best light for this day. White clouds drifted like gentle brushstrokes above Queen's Crest Academy, and the courtyard shimmered with decorations, ribbons in gold and pale blue, the school colors strung across the gates that now stood permanently open. Amara stood at the foot of the stairs, her uniform pressed, her shoes polished until they reflected the sun. She held a folded piece of paper in her hands, her acceptance speech. It wasn't long, just a few sentences, written neatly in the same careful handwriting that once traced letters in the dust. Ilara stood beside her, holding two identical ribbons for their hair. "Matching," she said, grinning. "So everyone knows we're sisters." Amara laughed softly. "I think they already do." Gabriel watched from near the school doors, hands in his pockets, an expression of quiet pride etched into his face. Around them, teachers and parents filled the courtyard, murmuring softly, waiting for the ceremony to begin. In one corner, Ivy Grant from the Chronicle was setting up her recorder, the same reporter who had once written the article that changed everything. She caught Gabriel's eye and smiled. He nodded politely, but today his attention was elsewhere. The headmistress, Mrs. Davenport, stepped up to the microphone. "Today," she began, "is not just an award ceremony. It's a reminder of what education means and who it belongs to." Her voice was steadier than before, touched with humility. "We honor excellence, yes, but also courage, kindness, and the grace to begin again." As she spoke, the crowd quieted. Then she called, "Please welcome our top scholar of the year, Miss Amara Nia Ross." For a heartbeat, Amara didn't move. The sound of her new name filled the courtyard like a song she didn't expect to hear. Ilara nudged her gently, whispering, "Go on. It's your turn to shine." Amara walked to the podium slowly, the applause rising like a soft tide around her. She could feel the warmth of it, not the kind that burns, but the kind that heals. When she reached the stage, Mrs. Davenport handed her the certificate. The paper shimmered faintly in the sunlight, embossed with the golden crest of the school. Gabriel's eyes glistened. He remembered another kind of paper, one signed in ink and tears only weeks before, the adoption documents that had turned law into love. This moment felt like its echo. Amara unfolded her note, her voice steady though quiet. "When I first came to this school," she began, "I didn't have a desk or books or even a place to belong. I only had curiosity and a promise I made to myself to keep learning, no matter what." She paused, glancing toward Ilara, who smiled encouragingly. "I used to think education was something that lived behind fences, but now I know. It lives wherever someone decides to teach, and someone else decides to listen. The audience leaned forward. Even the wind seemed to still. This certificate, she continued, lifting it slightly, doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to everyone who helped me climb the fence. My mother, who taught me to dream. My father, who taught me to believe. And my sister, who taught me to laugh again. She looked toward Gabriel, her voice trembling with warmth. Thank you for giving me a home, and for showing me that kindness can build things that money never could. Then she smiled at the crowd, shy but sure. I hope one day when people hear my name, they don't just think of where I came from, but of the door that opened and stayed open for others to walk through. When she finished, the applause rose like sunlight breaking free from clouds. Students cheered, teachers wiped their eyes, and even Mrs. Davenport clapped with genuine admiration. Gabriel took the podium next. He didn't bring notes. He didn't need them. I've spent my life measuring success in numbers, he said quietly. Profit, expansion, percentage, growth. But lately, I've learned something that no equation can express, that the highest form of wealth is kindness. He looked at Amara, then at Alara. Kindness built this schoolyard into a community. It healed a family. It opened a gate that once stood closed. And it reminded me that dignity is not a privilege. It's a right we owe one another. The crowd was silent. His voice was low, but every word reached. If we teach our children anything, he said, let it be this. Greatness without compassion is just an empty sound. But kindness, that's the melody that lasts. Applause erupted again, this time longer, louder. Amara turned toward Alara, who beamed, whispering, You see? He stole your line. Amara laughed softly. He made it better. After the ceremony, the students gathered around for photos. Someone started a chant of the Mango Tree Girls, and soon everyone joined in, clapping in rhythm. Even Gabriel laughed, shaking his head. You're going to make that name famous, he said. Alara grinned. We already did. As the crowd began to disperse, Ivy Grant approached Amara. You've come a long way, she said, voice gentle. Do you mind if I write a follow-up? Amara hesitated, then smiled. Only if you start with this. The girl who once taught beneath a tree now teaches others to plant their own. Ivy smiled. Perfect. That afternoon, the press headlines glowed across screens. From street to scholar, the girl who changed a school. But inside the Ross household, there was no talk of publicity, only quiet celebration. At home, Martha had baked a small cake, plain vanilla with mango slices on top. Naomi, now healthier, sat beside the window in a loose floral dress, humming softly. She smiled as Amara entered the room, still wearing her medal. My brilliant girl, she said. You've carried the light all this way. Amara knelt beside her, placing the certificate in her lap. It's ours, she whispered. Every bit of it. Outside, the garden was alive with evening color. The mango tree stood taller than ever, its branches heavy with fruit, its roots deep in the same soil that had once known struggle. Beneath it, new children from the reading circle were already gathering, books in hand, waiting for the sisters to arrive. Gabriel watched from the terrace, his hands resting on the railing, the glow of sunset painting his face. For the first time, he saw his late wife's smile in Alara, the same quiet joy, and in Amara, the same unstoppable will. And for a moment, he thought of everything it had taken to reach this peace. One act of listening, one act of trust, one act of kindness. Simple things that had grown into something vast. Down below, Amara looked up at him, waving her medal like a playful promise. Gabriel raised his hand in return. The wind moved through the mango leaves again, the same sound it made on the first day they met, but softer now, fuller, carrying not pain but praise. And for everyone who had been watching this story unfold, it was the sound of completion, a quiet triumph, sung not in grand speeches, but in the laughter of children, the rustle of leaves, and the peace of knowing that goodness, once planted, never stops growing. The celebration had ended hours ago, yet the air still held its echo. The ribbons that once fluttered across the school gates now hung limp in the evening breeze, and the mango tree glowed faintly under the light of the garden lamp. The house, too, had gone quiet, not the silence of absence, but the stillness that follows fulfillment. In her room, Amara sat at the small wooden desk beside her window. The medal from that morning rested on the table, gleaming in the soft lamplight. She had opened her old notebook, the same one that had once held her first essays written on torn scraps, and began to write. The ink moved slowly, unhurried, as if savoring the peace of finally having time to remember. Her letter was addressed to someone she hadn't seen in years, Auntie Lila. Dear Auntie, I wanted to tell you what your kindness became. You gave a notebook to a little girl who didn't have shoes. You probably thought it was nothing, a small thing, a passing moment. But that notebook grew into a story that changed everything. It became my voice, my map, my bridge. It carried me all the way here, to a home that still feels like a dream I haven't woken from. She paused, glancing at the window. The night sky stretched wide and calm, full of patient stars. You once told me that learning is a door, and the key is hope. I've learned something new now. Sometimes hope is a person, someone who looks at you and says, I see you. That's all it takes to make a door appear. She smiled as she wrote the next lines, her handwriting careful but firm. We don't need to be rescued, Auntie. We only need to be seen. Once that happens, everything else becomes possible. You saw me when no one else did, and now I get to see others. The children who come to our reading circle every Saturday. Their laughter sounds like sunlight. Their stories are starting to grow. She placed the pen down, letting the words settle. A gentle knock came at the door. Gabriel stood there, leaning against the frame. He wasn't in his business clothes, just a sweater and soft slippers. The simplicity suited him. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. Amara shook her head, smiling. No, I was writing. A letter? To Auntie Lila. I'm not sure how to send it, but it felt right to write it anyway. He stepped inside, looking at the page. She'd be proud, he said softly. You've learned the most important lesson. And what's that? That gratitude doesn't end when the gift is received. It continues every time you pass it on. He looked around the room, the books stacked neatly, the framed drawing from Naomi on the wall, the open window letting in the scent of the garden. This house used to feel empty, he said quietly. Now it feels like it's breathing again. Amara turned to him, hesitating. Do you ever miss her? Your wife, I mean. Gabriel nodded slowly. Every day, but I think she'd be happy now. You and Alara, you remind me of everything she believed in. She must have been kind, Amara said. She was, he replied. The kind who planted flowers just so the bees wouldn't feel lonely. They both laughed softly. The moment lingered in the air, tender and unspoken. Gabriel looked down at the letter again. You've built something beautiful, Amara. The mango tree circle, your studies, your friendships. That's what real legacy looks like. It's not about what we keep. It's about what we share. Amara nodded. It doesn't feel like I built it alone. You didn't, he said. You taught us all how to see what we'd forgotten. He walked toward the door but paused before leaving. Get some sleep, he said gently. Tomorrow's another big day. She frowned playfully. Is there ever a day that isn't big anymore? He smiled. Not when you live like everything matters. After he left, Amara returned to her desk and finished the letter with a final paragraph. Sometimes I think about that day under the mango tree when I first met Alara. I didn't know it then, but I was meeting my future, my friend, my sister, my second chance. If I've learned anything, it's this. Kindness doesn't just change a moment, it changes what comes after. Thank you for giving me the courage to begin. She signed it simply. With love, Amara. Closing the notebook, she placed it on the windowsill, letting the moonlight rest across its cover. Outside, the mango tree swayed lightly, its branches whispering against the night air. Somewhere down the hall, she could hear Alara murmuring in her sleep and Naomi humming softly in her room. A low, peaceful tune that carried through the house like a lullaby made of forgiveness. Amara turned off the lamp, the glow fading slowly until only the moonlight remained. She lay down and whispered a quiet prayer, not of asking, but of thanks. Thank you, she said, eyes closing, for letting me stay. In the garden, the night breeze answered with the faintest rustle of leaves, a sound like pages turning, as if the world itself were reading her story back to her. Night settled gently over the Ross estate. The last of the lamps had been dimmed, and the world outside had quieted to a hush. From the garden, the mango tree stood tall against the starlight, its leaves moving with the slow rhythm of the wind, a rhythm that seemed to carry every story ever whispered beneath it. Inside, the house breathed softly. Naomi's laughter could be heard from her room, a quiet chuckle as she watched an old television show she didn't quite remember the name of. Alara had fallen asleep on the couch, a book open across her chest, one hand still holding a pencil. And Amara, the girl who once studied by streetlight, sat by her window again, notebook on her lap, gazing at the glowing garden below. The night felt like a living thing, full of memory. It carried the echo of every voice that had brought her here. Her mother's songs, Auntie Lila's advice, Alara's laughter, Gabriel's patient wisdom. She thought about how strange it was that lives could cross like paths on a map, touching for a moment and then changing direction forever. She opened her notebook and began a new entry. This time, not a letter, but a reflection. Part story, part prayer. When I was younger, I thought the world was made of closed doors. Now I know it's made of keys. Some you find, some you're given, and some you become for others. Dignity, education, compassion. Those are the three keys that open every kind of lock. Her handwriting flowed easily now. Gone was the shaky, uncertain line of a child who had learned by eavesdropping through classroom windows. In its place was the calm, measured stroke of someone who knew where her words belonged. Downstairs, Gabriel walked quietly to the library. He had stopped working at night long ago. Now, he simply sat by the window with a cup of tea and listened to the house. He could hear the faint hum of Naomi's tune, the steady breathing of his two daughters, and the wind threading itself through the mango branches. For years, he had tried to fill his home with success. Tonight, it was filled with peace instead. He whispered to the empty room, "You taught us all to see, Amara." Outside, the narrator's voice would have come softly now, warm, measured, as if speaking to a friend who had just finished a long journey. There are stories that end with applause, and there are stories that end with quiet understanding. This one ends with both: the applause of a world reminded of kindness, and the quiet understanding of a girl who learned that home isn't a roof or a room. It's the place where someone finally says, "You belong." Amara closed her notebook and leaned against the window frame, the night breeze brushing her cheek. In the distance, the faint hum of her mother's song grew clearer, and she found herself humming along. Naomi's voice, though older and slower now, carried the same melody she had sung under the bus station awning years ago, the tune that once filled the spaces where words had failed. Amara joined softly, their voices overlapping like the layers of memory itself. The harmony wasn't perfect, but it was whole. From the hallway, Gabriel stopped and listened, smiling. The sound wound through the corridors like a thread of light, fragile but unbreakable. The narrator's voice would pause here, giving space for the sound of the humming, soft, timeless, before continuing, almost like a lullaby. In the end, what began as a story about survival became a story about seeing, about what happens when one person chooses to notice what the world ignores, about how education is not the privilege of the rich, but the inheritance of the human spirit, about how compassion, when practiced with humility, can rebuild more than homes. It can rebuild hearts. The mango tree swayed gently outside, its branches brushing the air like a hand offering comfort. Beneath it, in the glow of the garden lights, new children from the community sat cross-legged with their books, the next session of the reading circle quietly underway. Amara was there, reading aloud this time, her voice steady and bright. Beside her, a new girl followed each line with her finger, whispering the words as if tasting them for the first time. The narrator's tone softened, almost a whisper now, and so the lessons continue. Beneath the same tree and the same light, with the same hope. Because kindness, once taught, does not end. It travels in every hand that reaches out, in every voice that says you can, in every child who believes that tomorrow is worth waiting for. Amara watched from her window, smiling. She had grown taller, older, steadier. But deep inside, she still carried the barefoot girl who had once dared to listen through the fences. She whispered to the darkness, "We made it, Mama. We're still learning." The wind moved again, carrying her words through the night, through the leaves, through every story yet to be told. And then the narrator's final lines, spoken softly, with warmth and calm, as if tucking the story gently into sleep. Sometimes, one lesson beneath a mango tree can change the course of generations. Because every time someone chooses understanding over judgment, or courage over silence, a new branch grows, a new leaf opens, and the world remembers what it was always meant to be: kind. The camera, if there had been one, would have lifted slowly now, above the tree, above the children, above the house bathed in quiet light. The hum of Naomi's lullaby would blend into the music, soft piano, almost a heartbeat, fading as the stars brightened overhead. And just before the screen turned to black, the narrator would add one last line, the closing whisper of every Black Tales Stories bedtime episode. I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. If this story gave you something to think about, you're welcome to subscribe and share it with someone who might need it. Good night. The music lingered a moment longer, not ending, just resting, as the night and the mango tree kept watch over the family that had once begun with a secret lesson and ended with a world transformed by compassion.